Let's do this. Ah, there it is. The gentle fade. Hello, everyone. Did everybody stay dry on their way in? That was a joke, because I know you didn't. Hi, everybody. My name's Adam. We're going to get into this soon. Can everybody hear me? Good? All right. Anybody else in the back still want to come in? This is your last chance. We're being filmed in here. You, too, can be on film. Is that not a draw? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Very, very excited to be with you. My name is Adam, as I said before. I'm the MD for Techstars Equitech Accelerator. We're very excited to be coming to you guys again starting in January. So it's going to be a great class. Very pumped about last year's class. Very, very excited about this year's class. We're right in the middle of looking at all the applications right now. So if I fall asleep during the middle of my talk, it is not personal. I've just been up a lot, looking at a lot of applications, and they're all great. So I have to read them closely in order to get the very best folks in. So we're very excited to talk to you today at Baltimore's Innovation Week. And my job is to talk about finding your first investor. There it is, the magic of the clicker. It works. That is my Twitter handle. Sadly, in this era, I'm an old person with gray hair, but I still have to promote my Twitter because that's how this works. Twitter is unfortunately one of the best, unfortunately, one of the best ways to reach out there. But if you can reach me on Twitter, you can reach me because I actually check it. It's with me in my pocket all the time. So that's my Twitter. But we're going to talk about finding your first investor. Yes, Naomi knows him right next to him. Solomon, I have a question for you, and the live stream is suffering right now because I know I should be giving you a mic, but I'm not giving you a mic just yet. But I have a question. Do you make all the same kinds of investments? No. How do you make a variety of investments for a variety of reasons? 100%, Solomon. So that's one of the kinds of things we're going to talk about here today. Your first investor may not look like your neighbor's investor. Your first business may not look like your neighbor's business. That's normal, okay? Investment is a variety of things and is done for a variety of reasons, okay? A little bit about me before we start. I'm a former attorney. Please don't hold it against me. We call those recovering attorneys. Any other recovering attorneys in the room? Nobody? Okay. You would understand that if you had been an attorney. I'm a 3-time founder, 2 times venture-backed. The first time I was in a venture-backed startup. It was an international play. We did hardware, software. We imported from China. We did manufacturing in China. We imported through the UK. It was my first time, and it was crazy to take it on, and I loved it. I was mid-career. I'd already been practicing for a while and thought I would practice forever, and then got sucked into this ed tech startup, and it changed everything. So it was great. It sort of shook up my brain in I think, all the best ways, and made me really rethink how I wanted to approach my work. So I love this stuff. It's very, very exciting. It drew me in. I'm sure it'll draw you in too. I'm both an angel and institutional investor. That's usually how most investors start. I started with my own money, just sort of making bets, on things that I thought were interesting, and then started doing more institutionally as people realized I could be trusted at least a little bit, or my judgment was decent. I was a very mediocre high school basketball player. I don't know why I like to tell you that, but it leads to me telling you that the very best job I ever had was as a 7th grade basketball coach. This is always true. I always say this because it's true. Literally 7th graders who had no clue about how to play basketball. It was my first job out of college, and I loved it. And it changed, again, it was sort of one of those foundational things for me, which was like, okay, what do I really like to do? There's many, many different varieties of things you can do, but when I sort of could help people kind of move from A to B, move from dark to light, move from not knowing to knowing, very best job. It's very similar oftentimes to sort of the work you do in an accelerator, so that leads me to being the current MD of Techstars Equitech. So that's who I am. Okay, problem, lack of funding. What is a business without funding? Anybody know? Yes, sir. It's a hobby, 100%, okay? Without money, your business is a hobby. Nothing wrong with, doing a hobby, having a hobby. Hobbies are great. But ultimately, if you're in business, you need funding. And one way or another, you need to find some money to make it go. There's lots of ways you can do that, okay? And we're going to talk about some of those ways. So lack of funding can cause many problems, and funding can solve some common problems. Now, I grew up, my parents would be very angry with me if I did not say this to you. Money doesn't solve everything, of course. It does not. Sometimes it can actually, cause some problems. But in business, you do need funding. You do need money to sort of make the engine work. Okay? Typical reasons that businesses fail: cash flow problems, targeting the wrong market, bad product market fit, or needing to expand your market reach. Those are all things money can really help you do. It doesn't have to be venture money. We're going to talk about that. But money can help you solve all those problems. Another typical reason, businesses fail is like bad partnerships. But money can't really help you there, except for maybe buying somebody out of their equity. So maybe money can help there too, okay? So lack of funding is an issue for sure. But first, before we decide on, we just need to jump to venture, there are many ways to fund your startup, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that everybody has access to all these ways, all right? It's important to say that. Self-funding and family and friends, I think especially. Who do you think loses out on those most often? Probably the folks who need it the most, right? The people who have a great idea, have something that they know could get off the ground, maybe even have some customers, and sort of can't get from A to B because they can't self-fund, or their friends and family just don't have enough to help them fund, okay? These are not equally open to everybody, but they are options. If you can self-fund a company all the way to an IPO, how much of that company do you typically own? Anybody know? Or anybody guess? If I self-fund it, it's all my money until I sell it to the public in an IPO, an initial public offering. How much do I typically own? 100%. I mean, it's theoretical because it would be less than that. But if it's all my money going in, I didn't have to sell any of my company before somebody else decided to buy in. I own all of it. Is that better or worse? That's great. If you can do that, please do that. If you have that much money to be able to take a company to IPO with your own money, probably you didn't need to start that company anyway, but you own all of it, and that's great, okay? Friends and family, if your friends and family can help, if you happen to be related to the Gates family, great. Talk to those people first. Again, not open to everybody, but good options. Equity crowdfunding. Does anybody not know what well, actually, you guys probably all know what Kickstarter is, right? Kickstarter, for the most part. That's rewards crowdfunding. So I ask people for money. I give them rewards for participating. They give me some money, okay? Equity crowdfunding. I ask people for money. They give me money. What am I giving them? It's in the title. Equity, okay? So that is now an option. I mean, it's always kind of been an option. It's just been really difficult. There's been some recent regulatory changes to make it more of an option. Still, it's an option now, okay? Something you can still take advantage of. Grants and or loans. Those can be good options. Those can be bad options. Does anybody not know what I mean by grants and loans? You guys, fairly typical terms. Anybody need any clarification? Okay. Some downsides of both grants and loans, of course, but those are still options, okay? Customers, this is my very favorite option for financing. What do you call a person who finances your business product by product? You call them a customer, okay? If somebody gives you their money for their product and you have a margin on that product where you make money every time you sell it, they're financing your business. That's great. That's your investor. Your customers are your investors as well. And guess what? They don't require any equity at all. They just want the product. And that's a great sign, okay? That's a great way to fund your business if you can do it. Inventory financing vehicles. Anybody know how that works? Or anybody not know how that works? Here, I'll give you a rundown. Let's say I have a shoe business. Let's say I sell Jordans. I wish I sold Jordans, by the way. Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine if you owned the Jordan brand and you could just sell Jordans? Nobody else feels that? I feel that deeply. Okay, if I own a product-heavy business especially, it's very easy for me, or it can be easy for me if I'm selling a lot of them, to say, hey, I just sold 100,000 of these Jordans. I just bought 100,000 more. Can you give me money to buy the next 100,000 so that I can finance my inventory and sell those out? And I'll give you a return on your financing. Very easy to do that because somebody can basically secure their loan, secure their money against your inventory. Does that make sense to folks? Okay? That's a way to do it without having a VC involved. Private equity. Now, this can be a little tricky because venture capital is a kind of private equity, but typically the incentives are slightly different. If you're thinking about taking private equity, that's something you definitely need to talk to somebody about. Does anybody know, actually, Tedco, you guys know about private equity. What percentage, there's more Tedcos? Oh, who else? There's more, okay, everybody's pointing to me, and I love you guys. But would you say that private equity is probably more or less applicable than venture capital? Or more or less specialized, I should say. More specialized, absolutely, 100%. It's very rare that you would be involved in a business and need private equity. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, of course, but most of the startups aren't in that space typically yet. But it is still an option. Keep your eyes out for it. Okay, now the star of the show, venture capital. Now, being in venture capital myself, it's weird that I talked about all those other vehicles, I think, first, but it is very important that everybody knows those are also options, okay? If there's one thing I really feel like, in some ways, I want to get out more than anything, more than, Techstars is great, please come to the Equitech Accelerator, that's great. It's that finance can be really flexible. There are tons of vehicles in finance. Money can be flexible. People are willing to work with you to make money if they can find a way to do it. You have to tell them a story and have real data to back up how you can help make them money, and people will be flexible with their finance. So just keep that in mind. As a general principle, venture capital is not broadly applicable to most businesses either. Venture capital is actually only meant for it's useful for a few different things. And it's not going to be useful for every business. So that's one of the reasons why I like to talk about how flexible finance can be. So if you need money, if you need options for your business, and everybody does, it's very rare for somebody to self-fund their business all the way. Look around, ask questions, make friends, go to events, expand your network and find out what else can be done. Because oftentimes I think venture capital is the first choice because it seems like the only choice, but it's not. It's not even close. There's lots of options, okay? And by the way, I will send this to anybody who wants it. I'm not saying my words are all great or anything, but don't feel pressure to take photos or anything, and if something passes that's useful, you could absolutely email me. I'll email it back to you, okay? Make sense? Or hit me on Twitter, because I'll give you my Twitter again, because sadly, I'm old, but I need to give you my Twitter. Okay, why is VC most useful, or what is VC most useful for? Going fast, going big. Those are two different things, okay? Let me give you for instance. If you are Amazon, did Amazon win by going fast or going big? Anybody know or have a guess? Well, it's kind of both, actually. But ultimately, they won by going big, okay? Because they lost money for something like 11 years. Somebody will correct me on that. I think they were 11 years in the hole. Jeff Bezos lost money for 11 years. Now, I couldn't afford to run a business for 11 years losing money. I couldn't do it. But he could, because the whole point of it was to be everywhere, eventually to be ubiquitous. Literally, I'm sure if I pull up my phone right now, it's like Amazon is bookmarked. I probably ordered something last night and then 2 days before and then maybe a week before that. Especially given my kids, I'm sure probably ordered something last night and 2 days before and then a week before that. Amazon is everywhere now. So Amazon went big. They won by going big, okay? So that's a strategy. You can win a market or win a segment just by being the biggest dog out there. You can do that. You can also win by going fast. Anybody think of a good example for somebody who went fast in the automotive space or transportation space? Uber. Well, there was another one. Tesla. Well, that's true. Actually, that's a great one. So I was thinking Uber, but yeah, Tesla actually is a really good example as well. Tesla got there. See, now I want to talk about yours. I'll talk about mine in a second. But yeah, Tesla's good because they what they really wanted to do was to sort of put a stake in the ground, right? And their car, I know this seems like blasphemy to some people, is not the best electric car out there. It's not. It just was the first and the most obvious. They put a stake in the ground. Tesla. And now there's tons of other options in electric vehicles. And they're probably, frankly, going to make most of their money on the charging infrastructure. That's really actually, and the batteries. They'll probably make most of their money there. The car was just sort of a stake in the ground. So they went fast. I agree. Uber. Uber broke a lot of rules, broke a lot of relationships, got into a lot of trouble. But the whole point of it was to go fast. They knew ride sharing was going to be a thing. They knew it was a race. And they wanted to get out there first. And guess what? They did it. And sort of, a lot for worse, but somewhat for better, they kind of became ubiquitous. And they became, the Amazon of the space. Okay? VC was very useful for that. They burned money to do that. Somebody I worked with said something which I think is so smart. Am I doing good on time? I realize I'm not even looking at the clock. I'm good? Okay. I said it's so smart. Every business burns something to grow. Every business burns something to grow. And it's not like, money is a good thing to burn to grow in a lot of ways, if you can afford it, and if you have VC backing, and if the goal is to get big. Money can be a good thing to burn to grow. Don't burn people. Try not to burn time. Time is a bad thing to burn if you're trying to grow, because it's, at a certain point you have to progress. Definitely don't burn people. That's not worth it in the long run. Nobody wants to be, Daddy Warbucks alone and have to wait for Orphan Annie to come and save them, right? Nobody gets that reference? They even refreshed the movie Annie recently. Come on, folks, I'm not that old yet. Okay, but every business burns something. So yeah, money can be a thing you burn to go fast. Capture a market. Why would VC be useful for capturing a market? Can anybody think about it? What's a reason? Anybody think of a good reason? Yes, sir. Say that again? 100%, right? That's a beautiful reason. Let's say I want to make chairs, okay, and I want to make Adam's chairs. And there's there's two other companies out there that make chairs. There's Bob's Chairs and Jeff's Chairs. I make Adam's chairs, I get VC money, we buy Bob's chairs, guess what? We dominate Jeff's chairs, right? We've captured the market. Jeff's going out of business soon, right? That's a great reason to take VC money, because immediately the money makes a difference, okay? The money makes a difference. And it's not often that money can actually make a difference. Sometimes it can, though. To capture a market, it absolutely can. Especially if you can identify, again, I want to start Adam's chairs, Bob's chairs, and Jeff's chairs. I've only got two competitors. If I just buy one of them, I'm the dog. I'm the big dog, okay? Great reason to take VC money. Benefit from a network. What network are you getting when you take VC money? You're getting the VC's network, okay? You're also getting the benefit of their portfolio companies. So this is something we're going to talk about later, but one of the things you get with a VC is also the folks they've invested in. So you're aligning their interests with yours by taking their money, but also you're aligning your interests, their interests include the interests of their portfolio companies. So you might be able to sort of work some nice connections between their portfolio and their network. That's a great reason to take VC money. Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, we need to talk about what LP. Hey Adam, how you doing? I see you live now. Nice. Okay, LPs. Does anybody know what Here, I'll ask. Does anybody not know what LPs are? It's okay not to know. Yes. See? Bravery. I love it. Okay. Does anybody know what GPs or not know what GPs are? Okay. All right. See? You're good. We need to talk. Okay. LPs and GPs. This is an important set of terms in venture capital. Okay. General partners are the folks typically working in the venture capital company who are in charge of running the money. They're running it. LPs, limited partners, are usually the folks who give the money. Okay, they give the money and they say, please, GPs, take care of this money. And when you give it back to me in 7 years, I would like it to be 10 times bigger. Does that make sense? So GPs are the ones running the money. LPs are the ones giving the money and wanting it to grow. Make sense? It's a really kind of unique, it's been like 40 years maybe, 30, 40 years, maybe longer than that. That's been in place, that legal structure has been in place. And it's a great way basically for folks who have money and want to make it grow and give it to people who already know, or already making other money grow. It's a great way for them to say, okay, folks, I'll take your money. We have an agreement based on time and also based on my expectation that you'll make this grow. Take this money, make it grow. I'll come back and ask you about it in 5 to 7 years. I mean, they do a lot more asking than that, as Jamie can tell you. But that's generally it. Okay. Oh, and then also adding expertise to your startup. Another great reason to take VC money, okay? Because this goes along with obviously the one above it, benefiting from the network. But oftentimes, there's lots and lots of venture capital-backed companies that do not do well. And if a VC is smart, what they do is they build that network of folks who they've invested in, and then they don't lose them. Let's say your company goes out of business, okay? That happens. Because they're not betting on all of folks to win. They're betting on knowing that all of them won't win and hoping all of them do, great. But those that don't, if they stay in the network, that expertise stays typically in the realm, kind of in the neighborhood of the VC, okay? So sometimes you can pick that off. Sometimes you can be a person who has a business that is still operating and can benefit from one of the experts that's in a business that's now not operating. So it's a great reason to take VC money, okay? All right, so we've arrived at VC. We think we have a reason to take VC money, right? Are you guys excited about trying to figure out how do we decide which VCs to work with? Do you think VCs are monsters at this point? Are they just terrible, terrible people? This is the mystery private equity guy. He understands. He knows. No, I'm just kidding. We are not terrible people typically, but you definitely want to target who you're going for, okay? You don't just want to go, first of all, you don't want to ask one VC for money. That's a recipe for disaster. You don't want to also ask 10,000 VCs for money without sort of narrowing down what you're trying to ask for, because that's also going to get you in trouble. It's going to wear you out. So you want to be targeted about this, okay? How do you find a VC that will work with you? Generally, it's a process. This is the answer everybody hates, okay? But it's true. The answer to everything when you're an attorney is, actually, any attorneys in the room? Did I figure that out? No lapsed attorneys? The answer for any attorney in the room, or any attorney at all times, is always two words: it depends, okay? That is the answer all the time. That's unfortunately similar to this answer here. When you're trying to raise money, it is a process, okay? It is not easy to do. Consider it like a separate business that a team within your business is also running. Okay, so that will mean exactly what you think it means. It means if you're running your business and you need to raise money, that means you need to open a second business within your business to run the fundraising process. Treating it any other way is just not useful. You may get lucky. You may hit somebody on Twitter and where all VCs hang out, and they may love your tweet and wire you $1 million. That's very possible, but it is highly unlikely, okay? I would not expect that to happen. I would consider it like a separate business within your business that you need to run. And if you're the person running the business, frankly, nobody else but you should be running it. One of the just bad signals, and a lot you'll find out with VCs, is that they seem very temperamental. But if you're in the middle of, let's say I'm in the middle of, because this is about to happen, this has happened for the last couple of weeks, and it's about to happen tomorrow and Thursday. I'm going to be in about, literally, 25 meetings tomorrow? And, no, maybe less, maybe 20 meetings tomorrow and like 20-some the next day. If I get to the middle of those meetings and I'm talking to somebody who is not the CEO or is not in charge of the business, that sends a signal to me, because most people I'm talking to are going to be the CEO or the person in charge of the business, right? If it's not you running the process as the CEO or the person who runs the business, there should be a good reason for that, a really good reason for that. Because it's confusing to the person on the other end sometimes. Like, oh, why aren't I talking to the person who can make the decision? I need to be talking to the person who really wants to talk to me. So if it's not you as the CEO, there should be a really good reason. Start earlier than you think is necessary. Nothing is worse, too, than in one of those 20 meetings tomorrow, if somebody says to me, we're going to run out of money in 3 weeks, and I wanted to talk to you. That's almost like an automatic no, not because you're a bad person, not because business isn't hard, not because nobody is not sympathizing, but because on my side, like, money doesn't just fly out of my bank account or the bank account of my LPs. I have to answer for where that money goes, right? So my process is going to take longer than that. So unless my process is 3 days, calling me and saying we're going to run out of money in 3 weeks is really hard. So don't do that. Consider it like way before you need the time, earlier than you think necessary. And then always think and talk in terms of your runway. So what this means is I want to hear, VCs love to hear you talk about, like, These are the milestones in our business that this raise is going to get us to, okay? The runway is going to be, 6 months off, longer than that, hopefully, 12 to 18 months, 24 months. We've got these 3 milestones. What VCs typically don't want to hear is something like, we need to hire 3 people because we've been terrible at marketing. Because that sounds like the check's going to come in your bank account, it's going to be gone the next day, and then you're hoping for the best. Does everybody understand that? Does that make sense? Think in terms of milestones, runway for the business, the health of the business. Always, always consider the business and talk about the business as if it's outside of you. Because it is. The business is different than the CEO. The business is separate from the employees. It is its own thing. Talk about its health. Talk about what it needs. That's important, okay? Even if one of those milestones is a marketing milestone and you're going to hire somebody to do marketing, that's fine. It should still be in terms of the milestones of the business. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. It's a slight difference, but it makes rhetorical sense, hopefully. Okay. Once you've decided you need VC, does everybody enjoy the photo of that T-Rex? I was afraid it would be a little too frightening. Is it okay? We're good? Everybody okay? All right, we'll move on. Okay. Your first VC investor. You may or may not need this too much. Okay, good. We're good on time. We're going to have some time for questions too. You may or may not need this, but it can be really, really helpful for especially narrowing down that list. Look for industry expertise. So there are as many VCs as there are colors, shades of red in the sky. There's a ton of VCs out there, and they all have specialties, and they all think they're special snowflakes. They all do, trust me. And you really want to be able to, when you get in a conversation with them, understand a little bit about them and what they could bring to you. Because venture capital is a relationship, ultimately. It's a long-term game. If you're taking money from somebody who's a venture capitalist, it is at the very least, 6, 7, 8-year relationship. And you want to be in a relationship with somebody like that who you're comfortable with and who can add something and can add expertise to you and can even coach you in, it's sort of your place in the industry. Now, never forget, you're the founder. It's still your business. It's still your idea. But if somebody can add expertise over the course of those years, that can be really, really valuable. That can be really, really helpful. So looking for somebody with industry expertise when you're looking for your first venture capital investor, knowing, again, this is a long-term play, just makes sense, okay? Look for possible portfolio alignment or conflict. This can be a big one. Now, let me tell you, I've heard this story. I did not witness this, but I've never witnessed this, I should say. There's been potential for it many times, but I've never witnessed it. Sometimes venture capitalists will take meetings with companies, not to invest in those companies, but to find out what those companies are doing as opposed to some of the other companies in their portfolios. Okay? That is possible. Not saying they're out there doing that all the time, but that is also possible. So you always want to know who you're talking to on the other end of the phone, who you're in a meeting with. You want to know the portfolio companies they're deeply invested in. Have they done, let's say, again, I'm making Adam's chairs, right? Let's say I'm talking to the VC who's invested in Bob's chairs. I'm talking to that VC, hoping they're going to give me money. And they start asking me about my run rate. They start asking me about my production time. They start asking me about my cost per chair. What should be happening in my brain is, one, I should know that they're invested in Bob's chairs, and I should start slowing down the amount of information I give them, okay? Because oftentimes, you'll be talking to somebody who definitely has some sort of alignment or conflict in their portfolio. Good VCs, ethical VCs, typically, and most of them are, will disclose that and let you know. But you don't want to be the founder who's ultimately in charge of your business in that conversation without knowing that. Does that make sense to everybody? Does that make sense? No? Yes? Does? Okay, good. On the other hand, that's the bad part. The alignment part is that if you find somebody, again, I think we mentioned this before, but if you find somebody who's deeply invested in your sector and can help you because they have good investments along the way for you, let's say you're pre-seed, and they've already got Series A, Series B, Series C. Hey, what's up, man? And they've got companies that are ahead of you and can help pull you forward. That could be a real benefit, right? Their money's already progressed companies similar to yours. They already have expertise in-house that you can take advantage of. They already have that. That's something you should look for as well. And frankly, what would be great If you're in that meeting, the alignment meeting, and you know that meeting is, that alignment is in place in their portfolio, absolutely mention it. Tell them that. And I guarantee you, they will light up and they'll love you forever. They may not write you a check right away, but that means something. That shows you're paying attention. That shows you're in it. You're the kind of founder they would want to work with. So that's great. Do that for sure. Okay. Consider the full landscape of VCs. Okay. Now we've talked about all the different kinds of funding and how different it can be and how flexible finance can be. VC is not the same thing either. VCs can come in all different flavors. Does anybody know who A16Z is? The company? Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Sequoia? You guys have heard of Sequoia? No big ones? Let's see another big one. Andreessen Horowitz? Oh, that's A16. What's another big one on the East Coast? Yeah, Excel. Yeah, you guys know. Okay. So there's a category of VCs that sort of come in the name brand variety. They're considered the whatever you think a fancy car is. Let's see, Mercedes for some people, Toyotas for some. I happen to like my Prius. Don't make fun of me. Whatever the fancy cars, they're the name brand VCs. And then there's the kind of one-off VCs, right, who have just raised their first fund. Or emerging manager, somebody who's new to the space, who's trying to raise $10 million. Somebody who's trying to raise $10 million or has raised $10 million is going to be different, could still be a venture capitalist, is going to have different priorities than someone who is managing or part of a team of 15 people managing $1 billion, right? That's different. Those are different priorities. They come with their own unique pressures. Both of them have pressures. I don't pretend that either of them is easy. Neither of them is easy. It'd be great to have, you think, of course, it's great to have the problems of having $1 billion under management, but it has its own problems, okay? But that just means for the founders who are asking them for money, the priorities are different, and you have to know that going in. So for instance, if you have a small, and I just bias the whole thing by saying small, let's say you have a small ice cream shop, and you go to a person who has that $1 billion under management, and you want their money, they can't even get in the conversation with you, not because you don't have a good business, but because you can't put enough of their money to work. Like, they need to put that $1 billion to work. And you just can't do it with an ice cream shop. You can't do it, right? Now, the $10 million VC who's just gotten started, and you have one store, one location, and you've got a product. Now, maybe you're talking, right? Maybe you're in the mix because you do have something that's profitable, and you can put some of their money to work. So that's important to know. Who are you talking to? How much money do they manage? How does your business play in their landscape? Okay, in terms of how much their money is, how much money they have to manage. Consider the full landscape. Okay, another thing to know too, when it comes to like the little guys or any of the funds, they're oftentimes at different times of their cycles. So early on in a fund's life, a lot of funds will put their money to work quickly. They get, let's say I raise $500 million. In the first 3 years, typically you want to get rid of meaning invest, not just get rid of, 70% of that, 75% of that. So that first 3 years, that money's getting put to work. It's flying out the door. Now, the fund stays alive for another 7. So in year 5, I do have some money to put to work, but it's a whole lot less than I did in year 1. Does that make sense to everybody? So the life cycle of the fund matters. And you have to know that stuff. And that stuff they disclose typically on their websites. Not always. But doing a little bit of digging, you can find that stuff out. And if you show, frankly, again, if you demonstrate the knowledge of knowing where they are in their fund cycle or where they could be in their fund cycle, you'll win a friend and you'll win a fan. And this is a long-term game. By the way, VC, for how big it feels and how foreign it feels, is like a small town. Like a lot of other industries, it's like a small town. And it's the relationships you made 2, 3, 5 years ago that pay dividends in the present. So don't burn any bridges. If you find yourself in a meeting with, the $10 million VC who's in year 5 of their fund and they've got $0 to put to work, don't burn that bridge, because that person, if they do really well, guess what? The next fund they raise is going to be 75. And then if that does well, guess what? The next one they raise is going to be 350. So don't burn those bridges. All of the funds are worth, all the VCs are worth, and they're people too. So all the people are worth paying attention to and working with. All right, would a name brand VC help you? Can anybody think of a circumstance where a name brand VC would not help? And I need to be quiet in 3 minutes, don't I? Yes, Naomi. What was the last thing you said, sorry? They can be infamous too, right? And I'm sure the Andreessen Horowitz people are listening to this. But sometimes VCs get bad or in a bad spot, right? They can do something, whether they use money a certain way, they invest in a certain person, they have a big win or a big loss. It can be for good reasons or for bad reasons. Like sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not deserved. But sometimes a name brand VC may not be helpful to you because of sort of where they are. But what else could you think sort of more universally, like regardless of what they do, when might a name brand VC not be a help? Say that again. Beautiful. Right there. Give this man a sticker or something. Think about that. VCs, that's right, he's got a sticker. A name brand VC has a certain pressure on them. Remember we talked about sort of the amount of money they have and how they're cycling their fund. Runaway valuation is a great example of why they might push you in a different direction than you may want to go. So if I'm managing $1 billion and I'm near the end of the, let's say I'm mid-cycle on that, so it's not really early or late, but I'm trying to raise fund 12. I just raised fund 11. I'm deploying fund 11, and I want to deploy it with, what's your name? Forrest? I want to give Forrest some money. I'm trying to raise fund 12, and I need to show my LPs, the folks who gave me money in the first place, that our fund is marked up nice, right? Well, maybe I want to take Forrest's, I want to give Forrest some money, mark his company way up, and then I want to, this seems unethical, but I mark his company way up, and then I want to sell it really quickly, right? Because I want to have a good markup on my fund 11 to raise my fund 12, okay? That's sort of my goal. I have a personal goal over here with my $1 billion fund. I'm trying to work towards raising fund 12. Now, Forrest may not want to sell the interest in his company that fast. He may want the money up front, but he may not want to turn that equity that fast. He may not want to go through the whole reevaluation process that quickly. And then sometimes, like we are seeing, in the last couple of months, Forrest's valuation that was really, really high and looked good on paper may have to come down because reality is set again, right? Forrest now has to sell a product. Forrest still has to, what do you do, Forrest? What's your company? Do you have a company? Data Mine? Oh, data pipelines. Oh, that's a good company. We need to talk. But yes, that is, he may have to come down to sort of economic conditions, right? And so his valuation may have to take a hit. Now the hit, sure, it hurts on the books of the fund, but it definitely hurts the company, right? It definitely hurts the founder who's holding the bag on that valuation. So that's something to be very wary of, okay? Be aware of that. Not wary, but be aware of that. A name brand could help you, but it may not. All right, use your tools. Don't get in a meeting without having Googled the person, gone through their Twitter, or looked at their LinkedIn, okay? It's a great signal to somebody when you're going to have a meeting with them, when you pop up on somebody, as somebody who just looked at their profile on LinkedIn. I love that because I'm like, oh, okay, this person's doing their homework, okay? Make sure you do that. Use your tools. Don't find yourself unprepared that way. And make a list. It's a process, as we said before. You're going to have no less than 5 times the meetings probably you thought you would have to raise the money. It's always a process. You may get lucky in the first one. That's great. I hope you do. I really do. Don't expect it. And you won't be surprised when it doesn't happen because almost nobody gets lucky on their first call. It's very rare that you would just, start at the top of your lists and then kind of get lucky there. Oh, yes, this one's an important one. Before you go out pitching to non-friendly, start with a friendly. Meaning not just your mom, your dad, your cousin, your brother. Start with somebody who's in the business and understands the kinds of questions you're going to be asked, but who cares about you as well and cares enough about you to give you honest feedback. Okay, don't give somebody who just loves you. That's not helpful. I mean, love is great. Have loving relationships outside your work. That's great. But you want somebody who's going to be critical with you and knows how to be critical with you in context. Okay. Somebody who will ask you tough questions but forgive you when you say you don't know or you didn't look it up or, oh, shoot, I forgot that, okay? Who will forgive that? And then give you a second chance, okay? Start with friendlies. Always, always, always start with friendlies because guess what? You won't get second chances with people and it's not their fault that you don't because they're getting a lot of inbound too. They're getting a ton of inbound and they're trying to go through there, trying to do their due diligence. So give them everything they ask for, not because they demanded of you, but because you demanded of you. You want something from them. So go in there with the thing like packaged up, ready for them. Does that make sense, everybody? Start with that friendly. And then be transparent. Don't obfuscate. It always comes out. These are marriages. It's long-term. Money from VCs doesn't come with no probes or no questions. It comes with lots of questions. And you're going to be in that relationship for a long time. So don't hide things. It's just not worth it. And frankly, I'd say, and I think most people prefer to know where the holes are in the business before you invest, or at least sort of where to look for them, because everything's fixable. I mean, not everything's going to survive. Not everything's going to work, but everything's fixable. And it just takes some effort. So no use trying to dress it up. Nobody has a perfect business. Absolutely none of you. Not Forrest, even though Forrest has a great business. It sounds like Data. We're going to talk. But nobody has a perfect business. Don't pretend like yours is either. And then remember what the asset is. Who's the asset in that relationship? Say it yourselves, founders. Who? The founders are the asset, okay? VCs are basically shopping their money to invest in an asset. The asset is your business, okay? That's important to remember. You have the thing they need. So find the people who need what you have and then offer it to them, okay? That's like, there's a win-win situation there. Not every VC relationship will be like that, but there is a win-win situation there. Remember who is the asset. Okay, I think I'm done with time, right? I should leave time for questions. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Good, that's my Twitter again, my embarrassing Twitter, because people with gray hair should not have Twitter. Questions? And I will give you microphones instead of talking into the wind. Sorry, live streamers. Any questions? Or did I question you out? Yes, sir. See, this is a man who is not afraid to ask questions. Oh, thanks, Matty.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you're the first one to ever mention that you should have a business within your business for raising money.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense why it's so hard.
Yes,
so
sir.
It's a whole separate business.
It is. It is.
We're a tech company. We're focused on login and authentication.
Yeah.
What direction would you point us in?
Do you mean in terms of how to grow, what you're growing, product development? What do you mean?
Well, I need money, so whatever comes to mind.
Well, I would say this. Here, actually, so you said login and authentication?
Yes.
I mean, I think actually that is an area really, really ripe. And it's the single sign-on like dream, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get rid of all the passwords that everybody has? Because in general, as a theme, nobody should sell drills. They should sell holes, right? Like I'm not trying to buy a drill bit when I go to Home Depot. I'm trying to buy the hole that I need in my wall. So in my mind, the pain point that you could solve, if you could solve, I would give you all of my money, is can you give me less passwords? That's all I want out of my life. I'm at a very basic level at this point. Less passwords. Now, somebody like, what's one lock we're using? Oh, hey, I'm talking to myself in the future. We're using something at Techstars, is it one lock, one password? Password one, yeah. That is starting to do that. It's not exactly that, but that's the direction I would go. Because what it does is it basically creates a safe or a full environment that will communicate with all of the sign-ons separately, and I only have to log into that. That's the direction I would go. Is that where you're going right now?
Well, I would take it a step above that.
Please do.
So let's say LastPass, for example, Okta or anything like that.
Yeah.
You still have to enter one password.
That's right.
We get rid of that. We eliminate that last password. You use your biometrics, Face ID, Touch ID, things like that.
Right.
So that's the step above that we're at. Yeah. We need talent, and we need talent fast to grow this. Doing it alone. My partner, he's back there coding right now as I speak.
I love it.
And he looks like someone's... Let's just say he looks stressed. I'm like, come on, let's go over there and talk. He's like, no, I'm going to work on this right now.
Excellent.
We have the demo video. It'll be fine. He's like, no, the demo itself has to work. So we really need talent. We need programmers. Yeah. And to do that, we need money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll be talking to you.
Please do. No, and one of the things I would say, and I always say this to CEOs, one of the best, here, I was about to go up the stairs, but I can stay down here, right? Is this awkward for the people online? It's good? Okay. I would say the most important job of the CEO, are you the CEO?
No, I'm the co-founder.
You're the co-founder, okay. Or founder.
Oh, yes, I am the CEO, but
Yeah,
I don't feel like one.
Fair enough, okay. And those can be different too, that's okay. But I would say one of the most important roles is really storytelling. And so to me, that's how you get all of this. Now, money, of course, but how you get talent, you get people to believe in you by telling the story. So I would figure out what is the story of, tell me the name of your company again?
Block.
Block?
Yes.
Block. Blocked with ED?
No,
block.
BLOC.
I love it. Block. Okay. You know what this reminds me of now? Oh, boy. What was it? Fake block. What was the thing on Arrested Development? Did anybody see Arrested Development? Nobody saw this? Oh, you're all going to like this later. When you Google this later, fake block, Arrested Development, Google it. You're going to laugh. It was funny, but yeah, okay. We'll talk about block. But yeah, what is the story of block? Like, what's the most important thing? What is the core of it? Get to the pain. Somebody like me, who literally, I swear to you, has 16 passwords in my life. And I have to remember roughly 6 of them a day. And it drives me nuts. I hate it. Get to the pain of that, tell that story, and the talent will come. Okay. Now, and the money will come. The money is important too. It's absolutely important. But yeah, tell the story. That's how you get them. That's how you get all of it.
Thank you. They say if you ask for money, you'll get advice. Thank you.
That's absolutely true. And ask for advice, you get money. Oh, Maddie, can you, do you mind if, or I'll walk it around. I'm terrible.
Where am I going? Who'd you pick?
I'm like asking people to walk around for me.
Hey, what's going on, Adam?
Hey, how you doing?
So one of the questions that I always have as it relates to like startups is like, can you like break down the science of like valuations? Because I just feel like a lot of VCs that come to my clients, they're just putting numbers on there, and there's never really any logic to me in terms of like how they're valuing a company and how they get to the valuation that they're getting to.
Right. No, it's a great question. So ultimately, the difficulty for private companies that have zero metrics, they have no reporting requirements, except for to the people who are invested in them, is that they are worth what people will pay, and that's it. So if I put down $10 and I get 10%, then that company's worth $100. That's the valuation. Now, the reality is it may produce nothing like $100 worth of products, services, value. None of that gets counted. Eventually it gets counted, but valuation up until you have some real KPIs and metrics or output or throughput, whatever it is, are really up in the air. Now, typically, there are some neighborhoods that valuations tend to stay in because there's experience and there's lots of history that goes along with it. But like we talked about with Forrest, I mean, we're seeing that now. Lots of companies are getting downgraded in their valuations because the market is demanding that they produce something or they take a hit. And because, right, like the money's not as free anymore, and the money's not as loose. The interest rates have gone up, and so everybody's having to sort of put their cards on the table. So there is no easy answer for valuations because before there's any public accountability, when it's a private market company, privately held company, it's worth what people will pay. And it's the same kind of concept we go back to Tesla, right? We could talk about what Tesla's worth. Look at their stock valuations. Tesla is an amazing company that if you stack up all of their actual publicly available data, it's hard to say that their stock is a good measure of their actual throughput. Now, the Tesla folks are going to come for me on Twitter. It's okay. I love you, Tesla folks. But it's worth more because people think that there's more there, right? People think that Musk has something else in him. They think the economies of scale adding up, Tesla plus the Boring Company plus, all of his other endeavors is worth more than that. So it's still such a loosey-goosey area. Yeah, there's no clean answer.
Thank you. Is it good to have high valuation or normal valuation? So what's the...
it can be strategically good to have both, is the reality. If you're trying to raise money, you want people to think you're highly valued. But the reality is if you are highly valued, then you get that, let's say you get that high valuation, and then somebody wants to measure you at the next round and it was too high, then you're looking at taking a hit. So a hit is probably worse, in my mind, than having to sort of take a smaller jump in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like if I go from I'm valued at $2 million, and I get all of a sudden somebody's willing to give me $10 million value, it's probably worth going to 5 and then going up to 7, then starting at 10 and coming down to 7. Does that make sense? Yeah. Taking a hit is bad. It's a bad signal. It tells everybody something's wrong, or they think something's wrong. So I typically want folks to go slow in their valuations, not because I don't want them to raise money, but because I would rather them be successful and sort of exceed their target, and then be able to raise again and exceed that target and raise again. So. Oh, okay. I'll answer your question individually. Or should we do it one more? Oh, see, we got to do it now. He's being gracious, but I'm sorry. 52. Can you do it in 30 seconds?
At Quickstars, do you require your applicants to sign NDAs?
First of all, I like the name Quickstars better than Techstars. We should see if they want to change it. No, typically not. NDAs are usually and I'm way over my time, I'm sorry. NDAs are usually a good sign that, that you might have a portfolio conflict. We may do some of that like down the road if we've already invested, but like just having a conversation, no, usually we don't do that. And execution is 100% of this ball. It's 99% of the ball game. The idea is like 1%. If you can't execute, it doesn't matter how good your idea was. So yeah, we don't do that. Thank you, everybody.
I'll just say for those in the room and streaming, we're going to take a few minutes to transition the stage, and we'll start with the Hutch panel with Stephanie Chin at the top of the hour. So stick around. And then we're going to have Jamie talking about customers and brand loyalty. And then please join us at 6 p.m. at Equitech Tuesdays at Alma Cocina on the other side of town by the train station.
We're going to go ahead and get started in a couple minutes if folks wanted to come and grab a seat. Yeah. All right. Welcome to Baltimore Innovation Week 2022. Nice to see most of y'all in person, and thank you to everybody who's joining us virtually via the live stream. My name is Stephanie Chin. I'm the Hutch Program Manager at Fearless, and I'm really excited today to bring you our great Baltimore Innovation Week panel with three right now. One is stuck in traffic, so pardon his delay, but 4 of our Hutch companies who are actually going to be sharing their founder stories and how they're building diverse digital services to transform government and the communities around them. So for those of you that I haven't met yet, if you're not familiar with Hutch, we are a 24-month intensive incubator program based out of here in Baltimore City. We're very proud of that. We help to equip businesses with the tools and the mentorship and the peer support that they need in order to be able to scale within government contracting. Today, very excited to have 4 of our Hutch companies here. We're going to let them introduce themselves, so appreciate the time and attention today. So let's kick it off with Jess. Since you're immediately to my left, Jess, can you start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and then we'll go down the line to Coffee and Felix.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I feel like I got scammed by my other panel mates up here by being put in this particular hot seat. So my name is Jess Watson, and I am the CEO and creative director for a company called Points North. Points North is a creative services studio that is based in downtown Baltimore. We've been around for 12 years, which is wild, right? It's a long time. It's like a small child. You love it some days, and other days you're like, why? So here at Points North, we believe that good design can change the world. So we're constantly challenging the status quo to create experiences that bring people, passions, and causes together. We do that through exceptional brands, websites, and stories. So that's Points North. And again, my name is Jess Watson, and I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Coffee Harrison. I like to say coffee like the drink, but spelled differently. And I'm the president and founder of Uplight, where we're all about sparking greatness in programs by powering successful delivery through management services. What does that mean? We envision a world where everyone is walking in greatness. And so through project management, product management, agile IT methodologies, we empower our customers, we uplift our employees and teammates, and we also uplift the voices of the community in sparking greatness. And our daily motto is to have a great day on purpose. And so we want to bring intentionality to creating impact and, digitally transforming the federal government, state, and local.
Sweet. Thanks, Coffee. So good evening, everybody. My name is Felix Gilbert. I'm the president of Excel. We are a product design agency based right here in Baltimore. We're excited to be here in Baltimore because at Excel, our big thing is all about using tech, right? Using digital services to really create experiences that inspire. That's our focus, right? And when I talk about inspiring, it's really inspiring the individual at the core, right? Because at the end of the day, there is an end user, there is a person that's there to do a thing. So if we could create experiences that, say, for example, help a single mother who's trying to pay her water bill, but it's got her screaming kids because they're hungry, right? If we could help her pay her water bill seamlessly and flawlessly, then we helped create an experience that inspired her to go do a thing, right? Which is, now let me go take care of my kids, right? And our whole focus is, can we create experiences like that to help people across America on a daily basis? So we do a lot of work with the federal government, nonprofit, and educational orgs. So excited to be here with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you. And we talk about this a lot, about how hard it is being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, there are so many other things that you could choose to do with your time that is probably a little bit easier, maybe a little less scary, right? I mean, even Adam just spoke about in the last session how hard it is to raise capital and, how intensive this journey is. So what made you want to start a company? Why be an entrepreneur in the first place?
Because I'm crazy.
Because Felix is crazy, okay.
Yeah, but I'll just share for me. Like my brief little nugget to that is really, I saw it in my dad. Like my dad saw something in me when I was younger and was just like, hey, let me pour into you because you got this little design thing. You got this little tech thing. Let me pour into you. But really, it all got started like I'm not dating myself, but it started back in high school where it was just like, okay, hey, I'm learning this thing. I kind of picked it up, but I also immediately saw a need, specifically in the nonprofit market, because it was like, hey, you guys have great causes, but yet you don't look like Coke and MTV and everybody else in there. Hey, I can help with that, right? And it started there, but then it began to morph as I grew in my career where it was really like, okay, wait, now not only can I help you look a certain way, now all of a sudden now we could create real impact and help you really create movements, right? And also even improve your processes and your procedures, right? Like that's really where our why came in of like, hey, we really want to create global impact because we realize many of these organizations we partner with, they have their hands and feet in so many places. So if we can help them improve their way of doing a thing, then we have a way of trickle down and impacting people.
And remember that word impact because we're going to get back to that in a second. Coffee, why did you decide to start a company?
I think impact, I think I'm creating something that I can control and feed into through experiences. A lot of times you experience individuals going through different things. And I think just at our core, we just have a very empathetic culture, which I think is important. But my why is really, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and so I think just through that process, you go through this reevaluation of what it is you want out of life. And so as a result of that, and I think as a result of Hutch, our civic engagement class, before I die, right? And so what does that dash say? And so for me, a part of that was actually, I'm growing up in a household where our mother was an entrepreneur. That was a part of it. And so that, as a result, is a part of my before I die and that dash.
Just felt that.
I felt, yeah, that's a deep story that it seems like it's really connected to you and your core and who you are as a person. So why I got started, I've always been a creative, entrepreneurial spirit kind of kid. I was definitely the person who was selling candy out of her purse in middle school. And then once I knew how to draw like Disney characters and that's what people wanted, I was then selling those as well too. So that's always been a part of my personality. However, like when I went to college and I was preparing to enter into the real world, my parents sat me down and they said, Jess, and I looked up longingly into those eyes. I wanted that approval. And they said, you need security when you enter into the real world. So we want you to like really go after a government job. And I was, okay, sure. And I didn't exactly land in a government job. I actually landed right into corporate America, where I spent a grueling 5 years staring at 4 gray cubicle walls and thinking like, this just can't be it. I can't spend the rest of my life here. So I was in corporate America, and it was in a marketing department. And I just knew that I could maybe do things a little bit differently and have more of an impact than what I was doing behind a desk. Things that were really important to me were just relationships and making a difference, using design in a way to solve problems creatively. And so from there, I just started freelancing on the side. I feel like when you're in your 20s, you have boundless energy. I don't think I could do that again. I crave sleep tremendously right now, but I just was freelancing until I had enough work to transition off and start what is now Points North Studios. So it takes an incredible amount of drive. It takes believing in yourself, like believing something that no one else can see quite just yet, maybe. And it takes like pushing forward against all odds to make it happen.
Yeah, truer words were never spoken, Jess. Very well said. We're going to get back to impact, and Aaron, we're going to give you a chance to introduce yourself in just a moment, but several of you mentioned impact, right? So part of that being the motivation, the why behind your company, behind this journey. And for us at Hutch, it's really kind of a sweet spot because we're at the intersection of impact and community, digital services, and government, which we see as a way to really be able to maximize our impact. So can you talk a little bit about a project or, a piece of work that you've worked on over the past few years that is particularly impactful, or how are you making impact in your communities?
Oh, okay. Thank you. First off, hi everyone. My name is Aaron Brooks. Sorry I'm late. Being the entrepreneurship journey, I've been holed up in my house for forever on the grind, and I forgot how people can't drive when it's wet outside. So yeah, my name is Aaron Brooks. I run a company called Mastermind, which is a digital engineering pipeline company. So we ignite passion and technology, connect that passion to opportunity. So we train in all things digital, emerging technologies. We help organizations understand how to best utilize those to help the community. As far as the question goes, it kind of ties into the question that was asked before, is how I got started kind of running my business and why I wanted to run my business. I was actually an engineer at Fearless. I was a technical lead at Fearless. I had no aspirations to start a company, but I was the lead on the PPP loans application. And so during the pandemic, it was a pretty wild ride, like kind of leading the digital footprint of the Small Business Administration. But I got to see how good tech really does affect people's lives. Like, we got to a point where people in rural areas with slower connections literally couldn't access basic information to keep their businesses afloat. This is before the shutdown and everything. And it was like, wow, like this stuff really, really matters. And so it was pretty interesting being a part of all that. But I had the opportunity to join Hutch through Delali. And, I'm an engineer. I like to do new things. I like to challenge. And I want to try something out and learn from someone that I really trusted. But it's super interesting having been a part of that project, again, to see the impact on tech and to see what you can do. Now, a lot of what I do is training and helping people understand how to get in and utilize the same tools that I've been able to utilize to change their lives, helping organizations understand how to use those things effectively. And we've been able to reach literal tens of thousands of people kind of learning these things. And I get responses daily of, hey, like I literally went from barely being able to afford my place to live to flourishing. I'm going on vacations, all these things now. And that's a byproduct of what it is, but it's opportunity, it's access. But I get people telling me about the projects that they're working on. Hey, I'm getting to work on things like a portal for being able to pay your water bill, something that can be super duper tough. People who are in these communities are beginning to get to work on these things now. And it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting to see.
There's a couple that I think of, but one in particular is one that we're actively working on right now, and that's with the Opportunity Project. So Excel was one of the lucky teams, insane, out of nowhere, where we're able to work directly with the White House and the Census Bureau, where we're focused specifically on the infrastructure bill. So the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that got passed last November, the White House and their team is saying, hey, how do we get this infrastructure grant funding into the hands of small communities throughout the U.S., right? Because obviously New York, Philly, L.A., and others, they know how to go get access to this grant funding. But when we're talking to cities like Long Beach, California, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, tribal areas in like Arizona and New Mexico, as well as small communities and small cities throughout like Colorado and others, we're really, and even Alabama, I'll add them there to that pot as well. We're realizing that many of these folks are under-resourced, right? They've got access to the systems, but they're like, it's just me. I don't have the systems. I don't have the tools to go after this large pot of money. One of the things that many of our teams found out once we started was, federal money's coming down from up top, but then once it gets to your state does their own little thing and adds their own regulations and own processes to grant funding, which makes it even more difficult as a small city to go after grant funding, right? So we partnered with a couple of our Hutch companies. We said, hey, let's figure out how we could do a thing, right? So we're bringing design thinking to the table. But one of the impacts that we had recently, I was out in Montgomery, Alabama, and we were talking with one of the Alabama senators, Senator Singleton, and he shared a story. This wasn't how we impacted him, but the impact that we're able to prep to bring was that he said, hey, man, during COVID, right, when COVID first hit, obviously kids were at home, right? They're sitting at home. They don't have Wi-Fi access. So he was like, hey, my focus is getting broadband internet access into our area. So he's in the Black Belt of Alabama, which is like west of Selma, Alabama. And it includes multiple cities. One of the challenges he said was, he was like, look, Felix, I really need y'all's help, because at the end of the day, when COVID hit, our kids could not only attend school, they couldn't get access to broadband internet. So the impact and the trajectory for their life is, once they graduate high school, they're going to the pig farm, right? The pig plant, right? Like that is their career goal. I graduate, I go work at the pig plant, like my mama, my daddy, my grandfather, and everybody else behind. And he said, look, I'm trying to bring access and expose our community to transform, right? And basically kind of like cut the head of the snake off of like the historical systemic issues that our community faces, so that we can expose our kids to tech. We can expose them to so many other careers and change the trajectory of their lives. And that's some of the work that we're able to be front and center, directly in the hands and faces, and actually in the feet, like right where folks live within these communities, to figure out, hey, how might we bring and help you gain access? So I'll talk more to that later, but that's some of the impact that we're working on right now.
I'll make this quick. We were able to work with a nonprofit when the pandemic hit in 2020, Hack Baltimore. I'm sure many have heard of that, and was able to be a part of a lot of direct impact, primarily for students in just some gaining access. But a project that we're currently working on is with the with CMS within Health and Human Services. And with that project, we are working to make Medicare beneficiary data accessible. Currently, or within the past few years, it has been made accessible, but previously, if you're a Medicare beneficiary, you are carrying around papers, you are carrying around your records in a folder, and if you lose one thing, then that delays care. And so we are actively working to enhance and improve that accessibility. Right now, the accessibility is just by providing the data. What we're working on now is actually attributing the patient to we're attributing the beneficiary to their care provider, which is extremely important, right? So just helping the patient on the journey to get care if they are a Medicare recipient, extremely important. Healthcare is extremely important. So that is something that we are actively working on with 3M team members on that team.
Wow. Super impressive projects up here. Okay, so one of the ones that we worked on is actually also related to the pandemic. It's called Be More Vaxxed, and it was a campaign that involved OSI Baltimore, Baltimore Corps, and the Baltimore City Health Department, and was also funded by Rockefeller Foundation as well. The goal was to make information about the vaccine and the landscape of what was happening in Baltimore more easily accessible, easier to digest and understand, because the average person might look at the dashboard that Hopkins provides and just be like, what is this, and how really does it impact me? We also wanted to take care of some very basic issues that were blocking people's access to get factual information and also just go to get a vaccine. So maybe you want to go to a vaccine site to be boosted, et cetera, or get shot 1 or shot 2, but you don't have a ride. So we created a website that had all these different, I suppose, like entryways to help you get access to either the information that you needed or the resources that can make it easy for you and your family to get access to the vaccine. Because the truth is that there wasn't equitable access to the vaccine, or just like factual information within Baltimore City. We also ran digital campaigns that had real residents of Baltimore from diverse backgrounds, like students, adults, et cetera, just talking about their experience with COVID and why they chose to get the vaccine. So they were video advertisements, and they were the most watched that we have ever seen for any campaign, which we thought was really great because we targeted specific zip codes and area codes here in Baltimore, and because we really wanted people to have that like authentic sense of storytelling and seeing someone that looks like them or someone that they could relate to talk about like what's really happening in the community and what COVID is doing. So that was a project that we did here in Baltimore City that I thought was incredibly impactful and just very cool too, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can tell, the power that tech businesses, tech adjacent, tech enabled businesses have in order to create impact in communities is incredible, right? So none of their stories was, oh yeah, me too, I did that. But we have somebody who's creating pathways into technology for folks to help upskill and reskill and learn coding and development. We have somebody who's literally working with the White House, like the White House, y'all. That's incredible. Coffee, helping to provide access to health care for Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries so they don't have to lug around that briefcase of papers, right? And Jess, I mean, that's incredible work that y'all are doing to help folks be educated about the vaccine. Where do I go? How do I get there? Stopping the spread of misinformation. So this is incredible, impactful work. And I'm curious, we talk about culture so much, and especially over the past couple of years, a lot of organizations are thinking about the cultures that they're building, the cultures that they have, where they want to go, and how they want folks to experience their companies. So how does the impact that you're creating externally translate into the internal culture that you're building?
This is my Super Bowl question. I'm really excited about that because I think company culture is so important. And one of the things that I've noticed, just as we have shifted over the past few years to more mission-focused, like companies, organizations, and government entities, is that everyone is taking so much more pride in the work that they're doing, and they can see the impact. I'm really intentional about sharing with them what clients are saying and how things are being received. But like literally with this pandemic, we had the great resignation and people quitting because they didn't feel that sense of value and like they were a part of something with the companies that they were in. And now we have this whole concept of quiet quitting, and people like, and there's several definitions, but, essentially people doing like just enough and not doing more than what they're supposed to. And there's different ways that you can take that, but essentially I really do believe that company culture is it's ready for like reckoning to some extent, and your brand and who you say you are on the outside, like whatever you're telling your clients, your customers, et cetera, your audience needs to also be fully internalized in terms of your values, your mission and vision, and the people that you have on your team need to be able to recite that from memory. That's just my high standard, but like they need to embody it and also feel that sense of urgency and that pride for the work that you're doing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Love that.
Thank you.
You won the Super Bowl. So as I mentioned earlier, empathy, I think, is a big aspect of our company culture. And I think during this pandemic, one, I think it's worth noting that we were founded in 2019, but we got our first contract in January of 2020. So in that, trying to figure out our way and, how I can infuse who I am, as I'm just alluded to, into who we are as a company virtually was very interesting. Sidebar, I think Hutch does a fantastic job to what Jess alluded to in terms of doing a lot of intrinsic work so that your company is authentic and it correlates to who you are as a person. So with that, when we interview, we actually ask what 3 words do they first think of and when they hear sparking greatness? Or how do they define, or how would they translate have a great day on purpose? And so those are the types of questions that we ask in our interviews to try and identify those individuals that resonate and can better align with who we are as a company. And then just something that I like to do just as an add-on is I encourage highly, strongly, in bold, underlined, italicized, I highly encourage everyone to have their cameras on in meetings. I think that something that Uplight talks about, right, is sparking, and I'm doing all of these things. And so even if you're the only one with your camera on, you are making a connection with whoever it is you are working with. And so that is another just thing that we, again, highly, strongly encourage, underline, bold, italicized.
Exclamation point, maybe.
Yeah, I'll share this. Like, I'll respond via just a brief element of my story, right? So my father being an engineer at IBM, being in corporate world, corporate America, I've had the same experiences that he has, right? Where you're at a large company and you're just a number. And I remember reading reviews about one of these jobs that I applied for about this company. And it was just like, oh yeah, I felt like a number. And I was just like, not me, because you don't know me. I got in there and I was like, oh snap. Yeah, I literally feel like number 3048, 33, blah, 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 right? Like I really felt like a number. When I actually got connected with Fearless, right, they actually kind of did this whole culture shift with me. So I joined Fearless in 2016. And just the experience was mind blowing, because I had all these dreams about like, man, when I run a company, I want it to be like this, and this. But what I didn't realize the whole time, I was always wearing a mask. As a young African American in corporate America, I always had to wear a mask and not be my real self. Right. So when you're around, and my wife used to call me a chameleon all the time, because she was like, depending on who you're around, you're going to flip it up. Right. And you can talk to everybody. And I used to pride myself in that, right? But what was interesting with Fearless, and when we started going through all the racial tension, right, there was kind of like this transformation I had myself, which was not only through Hutch, right? Hutch was like, hey, who are you? We're gonna drill into you. Who are you? Do you know yourself, right? When we did all of that work, on top of the racial tension that was going on, I was able to have deep, serious conversations. At the time, I was working with the Air Force, and I was able to have deep conversations and beautiful relationships that were built because Fearless created the atmosphere where it's, hey, let's talk about the racial tension that's going on. And they brought generals, colonels, majors, everybody, right? Lieutenants, all the above, the entire unit. They said, hey, let's have these conversations, as well as the community. And that transformed me, because I said, man, I could really be myself, right? And it wasn't, as I was building out Excel, it was like, okay, hey, let me shave off that stuff, the bad habits, right, that I had, because it was, well, let me make myself look good. Let me make myself sound good. I don't have the PhD, but let me make myself look a certain way. It said, no, be your real, true, authentic self. And that's the culture that we bring, because at the end of the day, when you think about it as leaders, even if those aren't, there's people in this room that are not founders or presidents or CEOs in the room, you are a leader, right? And you bring your whole self to the organization that you are with, and it starts with you, right? And if you are not your real, true, authentic self, and let's be honest, we're human. We all got drama. We all got baggage, right? So you got to deal with your own stuff as well, because that stuff impacts everybody around you, whether you try to hide it or not. Because, if you nasty, you nasty, right? If you got a little attitude, you got a little attitude. And you got to deal with that stuff, because when you begin to deal with that, you realize, wow, I just removed the lid off of myself. And those that are directly underneath you can then all of a sudden rise up and say, oh, wow, now I can grow in my career. And it all started with you doing the hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I'm struggling with, and specifically because of the space that I'm in. I help get people hired, and constantly I'm fighting and advocating with employers for people who generally don't fit the bill, who might have the skills but had a little bit of trouble throughout the interview process of showing themselves. Like, yeah, they showed the technical prowess, but not quite themselves. They didn't show the energy needed to come in and make change. And this is I've had a very interesting situation where normally I'm used to advocating for people who look like me. I'm very good at advocating people who come from where I come from. But I had a lot of trouble advocating for someone who did not. And a guy had an interview, and he seemed great to me. All of our conversations seemed super amazing. And the thing that kept the company from immediately hiring him was when they asked him, hey, what do you like to do outside of work? He said, I love guns. He said, I love guns. And he was like, self-defense, I do all this kind of training and stuff. He was super passionate about it. As soon as we got into the conversation, they were like, I don't know about this guy. And I was like, was it the gun thing? And they were like, yeah, like I don't know about that. And so it's very interesting, especially in the climate that we're in now. And it made me have to reassess. What I was doing. Everyone talks about culture, wanting to build a good culture, but ultimately, a lot of us, when we say that, we're forcing our culture to be something that we want it to be. And I think that everyone who comes in, people started talking about culture add. Absolutely. Not looking for culture fit, you're looking for culture add. And if you're going to add to the culture, you need the energy to change the culture. And so now, I think what I'm trying to do is look for folks that have that energy. Maybe we're not completely aligned on like you're not exactly what I wanted you to be, but the energy and the passion that you have for whatever it is, if I believe you can bring it to my organization and start to move things forward, we can take that energy and we can mold it together in the right direction. I think that's the part that we miss the most. And so it's been super eye-opening for me. It's been super a weird experience for me trying to figure out how do I want to grow this company? How, when I am looking for people, am I looking for only people who look like me? Am I looking for only people who have been disadvantaged before? Who am I really looking for, and how do I want those people to come in and affect change? And so I'm still struggling with this. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for this at all, but it's been a very eye-opening experience as a CEO. I watched the changes at Fearless. I watched the way that things happen, and it's, there's no right answer to I don't think there's a right answer to any of this stuff, and it's just how do you want to put these things into place? So right now, I'm looking for people who have the energy to bring some change, bring something to the company, and we can figure out how to add that into what we are. I do have non-negotiables on the very first class of Hutch, which was amazing. We talked about those values that were important to us. We had to take all these words and boil it down to only 3. I can't tell you how tough of a thing that was. You think it's not a big deal. It was stressful. It was like a really stressful thing to do. And so I have some non-negotiables that like there's some core values that we all must adhere to. But outside of that, I'm working on being more open to allow the culture to develop to the place that we need it to be. So
I think that non-answer is a great answer because culture isn't stagnant, right? So you don't just say, oh, my culture is X, Y, Z, and okay, that's a done deal. Culture is always evolving, and it should always evolve. And folks who are coming into your organizations are going to add pieces to your culture. So I think that's a great answer, Aaron. So speaking of energy, as entrepreneurs, what energizes you? What do you do for yourself, truly?
I drive cars fast. I drive cars. I race cars on track. I build cars. I love motorsports, and it's expensive, and that makes me have to work even harder to support it. But I do that, and I've got a little one, and so I've been home. It's so nice to just get up from the computer and go play with her for an hour, like to just get up and move around, and so those 2 things I do: play, take time to play, and I race.
Sweet. I de-stress by adding more stress to myself by flying drones and doing random stuff with them, like letting them go too far or knowing it's about to die and crash, and I stress myself out. But for some reason, I enjoy it. But that's my thing. And then on top of that, family, right? Like family is one of our core values, and my family's everything, right? So making sure that I have that time to invest and spend that time with them, that's one of those other boosters.
TBD for me. Still trying to figure it out, but we get up every day and we keep one step going in front of the other. I don't really have a good answer for that other than seriously, like I literally just want to keep going. I want to keep trying. Some days I have to just stop and remember why I did this. Some days I just have to literally stop everything I'm doing and turn on Real Housewives. Sometimes I just have to veg, but I'm a huge people person, so I think just organically get my energy from others, and so that is what is happening right now, but I honestly have not figured it out.
Sign me up for mind-numbing television. I'm all for it.
We need a veg fest, you guys. Like, how did we miss that opportunity? Okay, so I do a handful of different things. What? I actually love traveling and working and living remotely in other countries. Prior to the pandemic, I would spend up to 6 months outside of the U.S. During the pandemic, I got caught in Portugal, which wasn't really a bad thing, but I eventually got back here to the U.S. I'm also hugely I love Baltimore. I think it is it's an underdog city, but the passion and the people here are just something else that I don't really see in a lot of other places. And so I love volunteering. One of my favorite projects, it's called Have a Nice Day. We meet quarterly and we write positive messages on blank coffee cup sleeves. It's a happy hour thing, but so it's you're mixing and mingling and then you're writing something positive. That sleeve is then donated to locally owned cafes around Baltimore City. So you're literally sending your neighbor who you're never gonna meet a really nice message and they're gonna look down and be like, that's really cool. And it might have a positive impact on their day. And then with the pandemic, I think a lot of us were challenged to maybe reinvent how we de-stress because so many things were cut off. I took an improv class virtually and that has now led to me performing improv on stage, which I never thought that I would be in front of an audience in that kind of very unique and vulnerable way, but it has shown me a different side of myself that I just didn't know was there. Actually, you know what? If there's time, I'm not gonna perform.
Are you gonna improv right now? Right now, improv?
I'm not. But there were a couple lessons from improv that have been so applicable to real life, and I just want to share those real quick. The first is that it's okay to fail. I think that we place a lot of negative stories around failure, but and Coffee knows this. We did an improv workshop together, and if you failed at the game, you got to go into the center and just yell out dramatically I failed. And then everyone celebrated you. They're like, oh my God, amazing. So we still yell that out just randomly when we see each other around Baltimore. And then I think the other thing is just that the moment that you are in right now is the most important moment. And if you can give all your attention to whatever's happening there, whoever you're with, that's the most important moment to you is where you are right now in this journey. So those are just the 2 lessons I wanted to share that have been.
Mic drop.
Right, panel over.
But no, those have just been 2 things that have been incredibly impactful and have really just changed the way that I live my life and also how I run my business.
I love that. Any tips, tricks, final words of wisdom from the rest of our panelists?
I think piggybacking off of that a little bit, yes, that I love that so much. Right now is the most important time. One, be kind to yourself. Always, you're learning. You're learning. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna fail. Be it's hard to be excited to fail, especially when money's involved. But be kind to yourself throughout the process. And go move. Just move every day. Just move. It's like losing weight. The progress is going to be slow. It's going to be hard to see every day. All the time you're going to want to quit and eat a bunch of pastries. That's my vice. A bunch of pastries. But when you move, take a little bit of time to look back at your progress. Every so often, put it on your calendar. Let me look at what I've actually done over the past 3 or 4 months. It can be very hard to see the incremental changes that you've made, the incremental progress that you made. So be kind to yourself. Move. Take some time to look at what you've actually accomplished.
I got one.
This is going to sound weird, but who it's for, that's who it's for. And I'm going to challenge you all to live in freedom. And when I talk about living in freedom, that's one of our core values. And what I often say to folks is that, hey, we always, like when you get a bunch of creatives and innovators in the room, we're always like, hey, let's think outside the box. Let's do something different. I'm oftentimes that one guy that's in the back of the room that's like, hold up. Did we do all of the work that we needed to do while we were still in this current box that we've got? Because oftentimes if you think about it like a plant, when it's in its little pot, its roots are spreading everywhere. But oftentimes what you realize is that, hey, if you stretch in a few more spots, you realize that there's actually more space for you and your organization to grow, right? So I oftentimes say, hey, do the work. Have you done the work? And then I'm going to turn that now on you all. Ask yourself, have I done the work? When you look at your own internal life, struggles, and let's just call it life. Let's put a nice bow and call it life, but it's really drama. When you look at your own life, have you done the work? Have you gone to counseling? Have you gone to therapy? Do you need to go work out? Have you done the things to take care of you? Because when you take care of you, you realize that, wow, I can really live in freedom.
Ooh, I love everything from my brothers. So to add to what they've already stated, I would say, I just lost my train of thought. I would say
pulling on those improv skills, right?
Right.
But I want y'all to also be thinking about your questions, because we're going to go to Q&A in just a minute. So I hope you're thinking about some questions for our panelists.
I was going to say, get you a tribe. So I graduated Hutch with Felix, Aaron, and two other companies. Jess, of course, is a part of the tribe as well. But it's important to have others that like truly understand what you're going through sometimes. These are the individuals who I don't have to say much to, but they get it. And their responses to me are just what I need in that time. And so get you a tribe that is going through or a part of what you're doing. In addition to your personal tribe, right? But get you a tribe.
Love that. Jess went first. Don't be trying to set her up again. All right, we're going to go to the audience for questions that you might have for our panelists. So now's your time. Yes, I'm going to come down and meet you halfway with the mic. That way everybody on the live stream can hear you too.
All right, thank you. First of all, I want to start off by saying I failed at least 1,000 times. Woo! Not going to clap for me, bro? I failed. Well, I just listened to all of you guys speak, and one, it impacted me. It made me think about me and my partner here. We're a Block, a platform authenticator, focused on eliminating passwords. And he was just speaking earlier. I forgot your name one more time, please. Adam. Yes, Adam was speaking earlier. It made me realize a few things, too. My questions to you guys are, how do we cultivate a good culture to attract talent? Why would anyone want to come work with us? We don't have any money. I mean, we're pretty great guys, but we don't have money, and we don't really have a lot going on right now, but we have a great product, and we have a good story, but we want to attract good people who would want to come, work for free and hang out with us maybe twice a month.
I'll say, I think Adam already mentioned it, but it's your why, right? Like start with that why and tell that story, right? To attract the people that you're trying to attract. Because you don't want to, in your world, you're going to get all kind of tech folk in the room, but you want the people that are going to stay in there and be up late night or in the back room coding, right? When you're at other conferences. So it starts with your why.
I'm going to say you have to make you that enticing person. You two have to be what people believe in. I think there are other ways to do it, but I won't say this because I'm sitting here today because someone like you, Delali from Fearless, Delali and John Foster, like I believed in them. I had never worked anywhere for more than a year and a half. I was an engineer, the traditional millennial job hopper, and I hopped around because I could make more money everywhere I went, and ended up staying because of those two guys. Literally changed my life. So you both of you have to, I think the best way to get people to come work for you for free or to believe in what it is that you're doing is they've got to believe in you first. And how to get there, I'm trying to figure that out too, but I think that's one of the most effective ways to get what you're looking for.
Thank you. Oh, does anyone else want to?
I agree with it being you. I'll give you an example. So our first hires, that were not like family friends, right? Our first hires were individuals, and I did a bunch of interviews. You can be inundated by just talking to people. But to their point, the people that get it are gonna get it. And so by telling your story, by telling my why, by asking them those questions, I would get emails back for individuals that are gainfully employed, so excited to join the organization strictly based off of our conversation. And it's not that I could offer them the world. I was also very transparent in that, like, we are small. We're small, but we're mighty, and I'm just laying it all bare. And those individuals are gonna find you, and they are going to be elated, and they will give you everything that they have.
I agree. 1,000%. So I think I'm a unique outlier within the Hutch program because we're not necessarily a new company. We've been around for 12 years. I will tell you that my core team has been with me for 8 years. So that's 8 people who listen to me tell my story and be really impassioned about what we were doing and the change that we were making, and have stuck around, have benefit of course from like becoming more integrated into the company, and like being compensated more fairly as we got bigger and better. But they came off of my dream, you know what I mean? And I think another thing that has been really helpful with me keeping them is I have a vested interest in their growth and who they are as people, both personally and professionally. So when your team is small, you can remember things like birthdays. You can do one-on-ones and see how they're doing. Talk about like some of the highlights and things and accolades where they've excelled at a particular job or project, and let them know and give them that feedback. All of that, like, apparently is not common in like the world. Employees aren't really treated that way. And so I think that being small and nimble can actually be an incredible advantage for the work that you're doing and the company that you're building.
Awesome. Let's give a big round of applause for all of our panelists. Aaron, Felix, Coffee, Jess, thank you so much. Thank you for our incredible audience, both in person and via the live stream. We appreciate it. And so we're going to take a break for 10 minutes, and we're going to regroup for our next Equitech session with Jamie. And then, of course, reminder, 6 p.m. tonight at Alma Cocina, Equitech Tuesday happy hour. So please join us there. Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all. Thank you.
How's everybody doing on a rainy Baltimore afternoon? It's always hard to be the presentation right before happy hour. So like you guys are the diehards. I'm glad you're here. Listen, before we get started, because so much of what we've talked about for the last couple of hours has been about team and your people and culture, I don't want to start without acknowledging part of our team, because they're not all here today, but Maddie, Naomi, Corey, and Adam. And Shaza, I feel like, you know, we are exactly what a couple people described as a small but mighty team, and we are trying to do something that hasn't been done before in the whole entire country, and a big part of the reason that I get up in the morning and do this work every day is because of this amazing team. So I just wanted to make sure we started off acknowledging them. So I'm the CEO of Upsurge. We are a 1.5-year-old organization that is trying to build the world's first Equitech city. And Equitech is a phrase that we coined to describe what it would mean to build a city that really was inclusive of all people who aspire to be part of the tech community. But I came to this work because it's really the culmination of a whole range of different parts of my background. So I'm a city kid from Philly. I grew up in South Philly in the 60s and 70s in the Rocky era. Actually worked on 9th Street, which if you remember in the Rocky movie when he runs up the middle of the Italian market in Philly, I was literally working that day. There's a teeny bit of my finger in the movie. And so I have a very, I think I just have a love for cities that I knew I had when I lived in Philadelphia, but I found like very deeply when I got to Baltimore. And I just think this place is amazing, and for 30 some years I've been here doing this work. But I didn't start, in work for good, I guess I would say. I started off trying to make sure that I was in a position where I was making enough money to be self-sufficient and support a family after growing up with a lot of need. And so I started off working at Alex Brown, which ultimately was Deutsche Bank. Some of you may know it. It was a longtime investment bank here in Baltimore. Then I became a founder myself. So I have walked in your shoes, founders. I know both the elation and the frustration and the desperation and the moments of true joy and breakthroughs that come with being a founder. And you have it all sometimes all within an hour, in a day, in a week, in a month. That's the founder journey. And I have such admiration for people that put themselves out there and do it, because it's so hard. My second company was a software company, and we worked with the early hashtag social movements. We were a community building software platform. And so I got really involved early on. It's funny when you think in 2013 and 14, people used to say, why do you have a hashtag in front of your name? Actually, back then they would say, why do you have a pound sign in front of your name, right? Because that's how recently this whole phenomenon of movements has really sort of come into the fore, particularly movements that have a digital intersection. And then that work led to me working with a lot of social movements and companies that wanted to think more like movement builders. And that intersection really sits at the heart of Upsurge and the work that we're doing today. And so this is going to be a combination of, I hope, both a little bit of inspiration, but some actual roll-up-your-sleeves details about what I've learned over 30-some years of doing this work that I hope you can actually take and put into practice. So we're going to actually get down into some how-tos. So part of what you'll see when you read about the vision for Upsurge is we are framing this very critical work in a movement framework, right? So we're trying to build a top-tier tech city. We want all of you who are founders to feel like you have everything you need here to be successful, that you have access to capital, to talent, to customers, to networks, that whether you're black, white, LGBT, a woman, a man, this is a place where you should feel you have the best chance for success in the entire country, and that's the work that we're trying to do. The second thing is that we want to make sure that we recognize that the tech workforce of the future is already here. They don't necessarily know it. They haven't necessarily been sort of told that this is a path for them, but we know it, and we think that there's work that can be done to make sure that any Baltimorean that wants to find a pathway into tech, if they choose it, that that opportunity is there for them. And then finally, we think that technology, and you heard some of that in the panel before this one, that there are technologies themselves that have the potential to reshape the future and to change the way we can approach equity in society. And so we think a lot about those kinds of companies, and we want them to think about Baltimore as the best place to come and grow. And if we can do all of this, or when we do all of this, it's going to be a model for the world. And this is not charity. This is an economic opportunity. Imagine what would happen if we could unleash the 95% of folks in the country, the 70% of folks in the country that right now only get 5% of capital for growth. You don't have to move that needle by, it doesn't have to go from 5 to 75. If that went from 5 to 10, 5 to 15, 5 to 20, imagine the economic growth that we would unlock in this city, in the state, and in the country, because we recognize the dreams and inspiration and innovation that's coming out of places that have been overlooked. We fundamentally believe that Baltimore's future major companies are not going to go and be recruited from somewhere else, right? We're not going to go get Google or Tesla to pick up and move to Baltimore. But the future Google or Tesla is probably here today. And if we do the right things for them, and maybe it's Block, right? Right? And if we do the right things for the companies that aspire to be those companies of the future, that's how we're going to grow in Baltimore. So that's what we're about today, is really thinking about what do we do to support the companies that want to grow. And I personally think that the way that companies grow now and into the future is they recognize that intersection between themselves and their community. And I don't mean community like Baltimore, although of course we want you to be, passionately involved in your Baltimore community, but I mean the community of believers that believe in the thing that you're building. So that's what we're really going to dig into today. So starting off with a couple of definitions, like what's a customer? A customer is somebody that buys something from you. What's a community member? A community member is somebody that feels something with you and with the other people that believe in what you're doing. They feel a sense of fellowship, of connection, right? There's some common value set or belief system that you all share, and community is where the magic happens. And I would argue that today, community building isn't a luxury anymore, right? There was a time when people would sort of have a, they would call it Adam, the old people. There was it was a group within companies essentially that was there were 3 people and they were sort of trying to market to build likes on social media, right? That was sort of like your community. That's not community today. Today, community is central to how companies grow. And I always liken it to if you're going to go to war, which in essence, as companies, what we're doing is every single day we're battling for hearts and minds. And if you're going into that battle and you aren't thinking about the community that you're trying to build and how to leverage their intense passion for your work, then it's like going into that battle zone without, the people around you and without your bulletproof vest, right? You've got to be equipped for the battle that lies ahead. So think about some of these companies and the intense feelings that people have about these brands, right? They're doing things that lots of other people do, but they are doing them in a way that inspires a community, that unites people around a common idea or set of values or vision. And because of that, they accrue disproportionate loyalty and they grow faster than other brands. A really great community, obviously you have to have a good product too. So I'm going to take that as a given that all these brilliant folks in the room are building great products. But a great product with a strong community is really the moat that makes you investable and far less likely to be vulnerable to new competitors. Because there are three things, again, I told you we're going to get in the weeds a little bit. There are three things that really happen when you find this sweet spot of this intersection between community and product. The first is that you have enthusiastic members of your community who actually help you spread the word, right? Word of mouth is the most powerful reason that people buy. And when you have more people spreading the word about you, you're lowering your customer acquisition costs. This is a very real thing. When Adam was talking about the way that you get investment, one of the first questions, if you're in software, that any investor is going to ask you is, what is your CAC? What's your customer acquisition cost? If you don't have a community, then every one of those people is hard-won through paid marketing, through hiring, great brand people and all of that. If you have word of mouth, then it's all of that, plus the community of people that are spreading the word about you, and think about that exponential growth that can come with that. The second thing is people that feel part of a community stick together, right? Like I say often, we among ourselves in Baltimore, we can complain about things, but let anybody from the outside complain about Baltimore, and we are locked arms, right? Like nobody can come and say something bad about us because we're a community, and when we're in it together, we feel that sense of stickiness that comes when you're part of something bigger. And then the third thing is that members support one another, and there's some really tactical ways that you can do this. If you think about Google Forums as an example. Think about how much Google saves when they don't have to have 10,000 people answering every question because the community itself helps support the rest of the community, right? So there are really tactical, they're the feel-good reasons to build a community, and then there are the tactical, real business reasons that a community can make the difference in your growth. So how do you do it? We're going to get into some real details. The first is a movement mindset. So we all admire the way movements have become such incredible game changers in our country over the last 10 years. Entrenched, huge problems that have been around for decades and decades or generations are changing in some cases overnight because of that intersection between a community and the ability for digital media to build a movement around change. But a movement mindset starts with this concept of belonging. And so the desire to belong is something inherent in all of us, but we also know that with all the things that we can belong to today, the thing that you choose to belong to has to feel worthy. It has to feel like something worth putting your time and energy into. And so that means that as CEOs and founders, you've got to think like movement builders. So this is a little grainy, but I'll take you through it. So the first one, and you heard this a lot in the panel before, is you have to know why you exist, right? It's incredibly important that you and everyone who works with you can speak to that why. And that why is not because you want to build a product, because that's not why anybody starts, right? Most people start because there was some problem that they faced themselves, that a family member faced, that they saw out there in the world, and they're like, God, I feel like I can solve this in a better way, right? That often becomes the why. The second thing is, what do you believe? That why then leads to a belief, and your belief system, we're going to dig into all of this in a second, but take it as a concept that a belief system is really fundamental to the way you attract other people. The third piece is what and who will change because you're doing the thing you do. And then ultimately, because you're a company and not a social movement, by how much, right? At some point, you've got to be able to say, again, alluding back to what Adam was saying, you've got to be able to say, what are the metrics of change that you can measure? The next one is who's one of us. And I would argue that sometimes the very hardest thing to define is that. I thought Aaron's point earlier about that challenge that he confronted when, a different kind of person than most of the folks that he works with at Mastermind sort of presented themselves, and he had to sort of rethink, well, what does it mean in terms of who I'm really here to support? Then the next thing is, how do we scale? We're going to talk about that. And then the final thing is, you've got to have a model. I don't care if you've got 2 customers or 2,000 or 200,000 customers. You've got to know how you build with your superfans, right? They are ultimately the people that love you the most, are the people that can help you grow the fastest. They're also the ones most invested in your success. So you've got to create a learning loop with them so that you continue to grow and change. This is a system. I'm going to share my slides. But essentially, this is both a, you could take this around the circle, or you could take this in any direction, and that's kind of what this is showing. That first off is your business, your team, your product, your market. Who are the customers? And I'm using that word intentionally. Remember, customers are just the people who buy it, right? Then, who's the community of superfans that grow out of that customer base? These are the people that all day long you should be thinking about, because they're the ones that spread the word. They're the ones that give you the feedback. They're the ones that are invested in your success. And then how do you use that combination of what you learn from them plus the data that you're driving as you learn to keep improving the product, the team, the market? And then ultimately, if all of that works, you've got that problem that you're solving in the middle that you get closer and closer to being able to solve. And the truth is, almost no company ever solves the problem, because as they get deeper into it, they realize there's another opportunity, something else they can do better. So that kind of stays perpetually. So one example, Lego. So I like to use ones that everybody knows. A lot of these are not small tech companies, but if I took small tech companies, not everybody would know them. So let's talk about Lego. In 2013, you don't have to be able to see much, but on that chart, if that was a revenue, that's a profit chart. That's you don't have to know much to know that you don't want to see those bars going below the line there. In 2013, Lego almost went into bankruptcy. And they were making the same plastic bricks they'd made forever, but they did a lot of things that they started adding all these colors. They started trying to have 8 gazillion SKUs. And what they realized at some point was that they'd sort of lost their way, and when they were competing with all the other things that a parent could buy for their kids, they were losing the battle, and particularly at that point against digital. So they did a lot of internal reflection. There are case studies about this, at Harvard. But what they ultimately did was they reframed their why to that statement at the top: to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. So if you're a parent and you're standing in a store and you can buy the Furby, is that still a thing? No, I don't know, what do kids today, Talking Elmo or whatever. You can tell my kids are all adults. Or you can buy something that is going to help your kid become a builder of tomorrow. That's a really different decision, right? So this idea that they could inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow led them to do a whole bunch of other community-related things. So they created Lego Ideas, which is literally a co-creation platform. It's this picture here that you can't see, where they've got 2 million members. They've submitted, as of a month or two ago, 38,000 project ideas. 38 of those co-created Lego kits came directly from this market and sold out immediately when they were released, because the community was empowered to help them create the next product. They have LegoCon, which they didn't start, their community started. Right now it's a huge thing for them, but their community created this place where they could come together. They recognize that some of the builders of tomorrow aren't kids, so consistent with their mission, many of the builders of tomorrow are adults. And so they created, I don't know if you can see this, but this is Paris and the Eiffel Tower and downtown Singapore, and they created adult architectural Lego kits to appeal to the builders of tomorrow who are not kids. But it's all consistent with the community and the vision that they had. They set it out in their why, and then they set out systematically to change. And in this past year, that chart ended in 2014. Their growth and profits have been straight up. Their growth this past year was, their revenue was $7.9 billion. It's a giant company, and they have fully regained, they have 70% margins as a business. Like, it's a dream business. And all because they figured out how to create a why that mattered to people and a community that cared. Salesforce, arguably not a great product, right? I mean, how many of you have used Salesforce? It is not a great product. But Salesforce did some really important things early on, which is they understood the superfan. They understood those early users, and they connected them deeply from the beginning into the community. They also created, in a similar way that iPhone did with the App Store, they created an open platform for apps to be developed on there. So they, again, they wove people in with more connections to their work. And now they too have a community of 2 million members. Dreamforce, pre-COVID, it'll be interesting to see, how it starts to rebuild post-COVID. But in the year before COVID, Dreamforce had 200,000 people attend a conference. Think about that, right? That's bigger than half the towns in the United States, right? And a lot of what they have done is they've created these internal support mechanisms where people that have Salesforce become the support system and the word of mouth for other people that buy Salesforce. I like this example because it's not a great product, but it's a great business. And it's a great business because of the community. So core concept number 2, intensity matters more than scale. Because passion drives action. So you can feel whatever you feel about what Colin Kaepernick did when he started taking a knee. But what Nike recognized was people felt strongly about it, and that the people they cared about felt strongly in a positive way. And so I don't know if everybody remembers this, but Kaepernick was essentially out of the spotlight for almost a year and a half before Nike, out of the blue, and it was also much more in the height of more players taking knees, and it was a huge controversy at this point. And Nike sort of said, look, we think that passion drives action, and they took the risk that their audience would be more inspired by the passion of taking a stand than the people that they might lose because they didn't agree. The ad went public, the Believe in Something ad, which I just think says it all, right? And the company's sales online within a week after the ad jumped 31%. Now, obviously, that's not sustained growth, but it just shows you how powerful it is when you can motivate people around something they believe passionately in. So there's 4 levels of customers, and this helps, again, we're going to talk a little bit technically for a minute about how you start to think about building that passion. At level 1, all you are is a supplier of a product. And if somebody else can supply that product more cheaply because there's no connection, you don't keep that customer. Everything is about price and maybe some features. The second thing, at the second level, you're helping that person get a job done, and you may be making them look good to a boss, to a colleague, to a co-founder, right? That's a second level of interaction. At level 3, you're starting to engage them emotionally so that you're giving them those delightful moments of appreciation that come with appreciating a community. Perhaps you're recognizing them because they're sort of growing into a fan. Or you're creating a way that they can share their knowledge by recognizing them on social media or in some other way that you can make them feel like they're critical to you and you recognize that they're supporting your work. And then finally, at level 4, you're actually helping people build social capital. And for so many people today, social capital is a foundational dimension of how they see themselves as people, because social capital is about your networks and your influence and your ability to do good work and to make an impact. And so when you start to create the ability for somebody to be important in your world, and really social capital, that's kind of what it is. It's like you're important to somebody. You start to create a relationship that becomes very hard to unstick by a competitor. And I would argue that a small group of intensely passionate customers is really the foundation to everything you are trying to build as a founder. And that's why I said it doesn't matter if you have 2 or 20 or 200,000. If you have 2 people who love you, boy, you should be talking to them all the time. You should be featuring them on your social media. You should be asking them who they know, who also would find what you're doing valuable. Those super fans are like, they're what's more valuable, platinum. They're more valuable than gold to your growing business. So a visual metaphor we talk about as a team a lot is this concept of weaving, right? If you can picture a loom, and you just picture, a piece of fabric, right? This is your company and this is your customers, right? And in general, so much of what you're doing is you're trying to sort of deliver a product that this customer will buy. And that's great, and every company needs customers, because not everybody can be a super fan. But where the strong fabric happens is when you create the connection. So the professional and the emotional connection that starts to weave across. So let me use an example in a bank, because I think we all understand kind of how banks work. Most of us have a relationship with our bank, and we have our checking or our savings account. We don't feel particularly emotionally connected to our bank, right? It's the place that we are. And honestly, banks, the way they keep you is because they put you on their online banking and they make it so that they don't let you transfer anything off it. So you're held hostage. That's not a good way to build a relationship, just FYI. But imagine if you are a small business banker at a bank, and once a quarter you get all the restaurants together that you've lent to, and you create a community of all the restaurants that your bank works with. And now all those restaurants are part of a group, and they're supporting each other. And they're looking forward to that next meetup where they can learn, how did you deal with DoorDash increasing their fees? Or how are you working on this problem of, finding servers in this tight labor market? All facilitated by this bank who's providing the forum and the coffee and the donuts for you all to get together once a quarter. Now, if somebody in that restaurant group wants to think about leaving and going with a different bank and they're not going to have access to the group anymore, that's a really different decision than if they weren't part of this community that the bank has helped to build. Does that make sense? So that's this weaving it all together. I'm going to let you guys read this when I share this, because this is really in the weeds, and this level of fuzziness, I'm not sure is going to lend itself to it. So let's actually go into branding, because this, I think, is ultimately, when Jess or somebody was saying that in the prior panel, everything has to hang together. So you can't just be a great business, have great, relationships with your employees and customers, and not have your brand be aligned. So I'm a big fan of a branding book that I read, 10 years ago. It's called Primal Branding. And over the years, I've used this in my own businesses and with so many of the companies that I've advised. And essentially, branding is really, if you think about it at its heart, what it should be doing is it should be a journey to belonging. Right? Because a brand should ultimately make you feel connected to the thing that the brand is communicating with you. And so, belonging is a relationship, and it's connected to these core things: a belief system, product value. Are you getting value from this product that you're buying from the company? Do you feel that it's authentic? Like, are you having an authentic relationship with the company that you're purchasing from? Is there trust in the way that you're being interacted with? Like, again, I would argue again, this whole thing of being held hostage by banks because they won't let you take your own information out of an online banking system and go to another bank. Like, that's sort of this question of like, you don't trust me enough to do a good job, so you're going to hold me hostage, right? And then finally, it's this concept of learning loops and social capital. But beyond, the sort of this journey to belonging in a theory, what does it look like in practice? And so these 7 things give an architecture to how you think about a strong brand. So you have a creation story, a creed, icons, rituals, sacred words, and leaders. So what do those look like? So a creation story is the origin. It's like, how did we get here? And, we know many of them. 2 guys in a garage, right? 2 kids in a college dorm create an app to rate girls, Facebook. Coke, a pharmacist creates a soft drink that's meant to be medicinal and it ultimately becomes Coke, right? So think about the creation story. But the whole idea is that in a sentence or 2, it sort of anchors people in this sense of origin. Then a creed is sort of that synopsis of your belief system. A belief that all men are created equal, a belief in life after death, a belief in making America great again. You can roll your eyes, but I'm telling you, it's the reason he won. A belief that you can be the greatest t-shirt shop in the whole world. Whatever it is, that core belief is like the rallying cry of your community. Icons are little totems of meaning, and they're much more than logos, right? Because icons can engage any part of, think now, again, this won't surprise anybody, but I'm super liberal, but I think it's important to understand why we are in this polarized moment as a country. If you see a red hat, if you walk down the street and you see a red hat from the back now, what do you think? Right? Like, literally, we assume something because this hat has come to have so much significance, these Make America Great Again hats. Colors and logos mean so much. Think about colors that we identify, pink for breast cancer. Just think about colors that as soon as you see them, they mean something in your mind because they become so associated with a brand. Rituals. People forget this, but until the iPhone, swiping wasn't a thing, right? I sat on a plane a couple of years ago, right before COVID, next to an 18-month-old. And we had those TVs in the back of the seats in front of us. And this is an 18-month-old. And her mother put on some little movie on the thing. And when the captain would come on to interrupt, to tell you to put your seatbelt on or whatever, this 18-month-old started swiping the screen, right? Think about how ubiquitous that has become in our culture. That's a ritual. That was something that now it's everywhere. But there was a time when that was part of creating this iconic iPhone that so many of us have become dependent on. Think about twisting the Oreo. Think about, again, at Trump rallies, the lock her up chant back in the 2016 election. Think about those rituals that make people feel like you're in the circle because you know the secret handshake, right? That's a huge part of building community. Sacred words. We thought hard with Upsurge about what was a word to describe, simply what it was we were trying to do with this concept of a tech for all city, which doesn't roll off the tongue. And Equitech was a phrase that we coined to be able to say in a word what we were trying to do. Words matter. And so again, think about some of the ways that the vocabulary of a business contributes to that sense of community and brand. Again, that sense of being in the tent because you know the language of the organization, the language of the company. Non-believers. In some ways, non-believers are the most important people to understand. Because most of us, again, when I was saying that thing before about how, like, among ourselves, we can talk about our frustrations with Baltimore, but if somebody outside says anything bad about us, we are locked arms. Non-believers create the villain in our story. And the truth is, almost nothing grows without the villain on the other side. And so it's really important to know who the believers and non-believers are, but the non-believers create the counterpoint that you're trying to establish with the thing that you're trying to grow. And then finally is the iconic leader, and for most of you founders, that person is you. But we know through history that lots of really smart people have tried lots of important things, but if they didn't have that inspiring leader who could bring a community together, it often didn't happen. So think about the role you play as a founder, not just in doing good work, not just in having an authentic mission, not just in being a great boss, but how are you inspiring people to want to be along on the ride with you? All right, so I'm going to give some examples. We're going to start with Trump, the villain in my story. So this is how this looks in practice. We're going to go through a few examples. So the creation story, a false one, admittedly, but the creation story. Tough young guy who took dad's Queen's business and grew it into a worldwide empire, runs for president. Right? We kind of all know that creation story. Creed, make America great again. Super simple. All the icons, right? The rituals, this is particularly 2016. The build the wall chant, the big fanfare entrances, flattering the boss, tweeting. Sacred words. Loser, tremendous, the best, rigged, freedom. Like, again, we can all name these. We may not agree with them, but we understand this brand and we know where we stand relative to it. And then the non-believers, Democrats, rhinos, the mainstream media, Ivy League liberals, Hollywood, and then of course the leader. So in 2016, I couldn't do this for Hillary Clinton. Right? I couldn't take and put onto a slide like this a recognizable set of brand elements for Hillary Clinton's campaign. So I think of Trump as the first brand president. But Biden figured it out. Not quite, Trump is a master at this, so not quite as well as Trump, but realized that he had to have these elements underpinning his campaign. So average Joe, right? Average Joe from Scranton, PA, overcomes unspeakable tragedies to rise to the highest office in the land, but never forgets where he came from. We all sort of know that, some version of that story for Biden. His creed, restore the soul of America. He had a reasonably memorable logo, not super memorable, but he unapologetically wore his face mask. He had his aviator sunglasses. They made a thing, and most people don't realize this, but they actually made a decision not to have gigantic signs everywhere. It was a very deliberate decision to have small, kind of everywhere, grassrootsy looking signs. Again, it's saying something about the campaign they were trying to be. And then their rituals, drive-in rallies, honking, masking, distancing, Zooms from his basement. Sacred words were better than this. Together, honesty, character, fairness, science became a sacred word. Non-believers, Republicans, QAnon, even on the liberal side, Bernie bros, right? There was a whole anti-Biden faction among plenty of liberals, and then obviously the leader. But let's look at a company. So let's look at Apple. So a couple of HP employees started building personal computers in their garage. They came up with a creed, think different, that they still use today, all these years later. Think about their icons. The Apple logo, is with the bite taken out, right? So pivotal to their success. But think about the silver and white palette. that now we see everywhere, like all the way through to like the way, like the color palettes people like in their homes, right? That silver and white palette started with the iPhone. If you think about that, think about the look of the Apple stores, right? Just how that whole visual is this very unified brand. Rituals, swiping, buying music on iTunes, loading your pictures in iPhoto, this concept of no focus groups, new releases, and the big fanfare around new releases, like such a big thing, right? Lots of sacred words, non-believers, PC and Samsung owners, right? And people feel strongly about the thing that they believe in as it relates to Apple, and then obviously the leader was Steve Jobs. So the point is that when you take all of this together, doesn't matter, again, I'm going to go back to this, I'm going to say it over and over again. If you have 2 or 20 or 20,000 or 200,000 customers, if you can create this kind of connection to your community and your brand, I love this. This is Patrick Hanlon's, not mine, from Primal Branding. The result is a sticky brand powered by a community of staunch advocates who tingle with every brand breath they take. And think about that slide I showed way back in the beginning with Harley and with Slack and with MailChimp and with Moleskine and with Everlane. Like, so think about some of these brands. Chick-fil-A, they may not be the thing you like, but you know how passionately people feel about them. That's the thing that community gives you. So final thought, and interestingly, Adam said this earlier, but I'm going to relate it to why community is so important. So people don't want to drill. They want a hole. Adam said that as it relates to investors, but I think that is the most fundamental principle when you're thinking about how to build a business, because if what you're going to stand up there and do is tell me you got a drill, and it's got this attachment and this feature and a light and, you know, all these things that come with it, if the only thing I need is the hole, you're just like blah, 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 talking into the air at me, right? Because I don't care about any of that. I care about how I'm going to get the hole, the size I want, when I want it, where I want it, right? So the way that you think about and look, if you're a technologist, we all fall in love with our products. I have been there. I have done it. I've made the mistake. But the truth is, your product only matters if it is solving the problem, the simple problem that the person is looking to solve. So the tool itself should really be considered just a small part of what you think about as a founder. The knowledge, the networks, the service, and the community are really the difference between the business you are today and the business you aspire to be in the future. And we're here to help at Upsurge, so let's grow together. And I'm happy to take some questions. Yeah. Wait.
Thank you. I like what you said about building a community. And a lot of the branding messages you said I agree with. I don't know if you've ever heard of, actually I won't even go into that. But the community part of it I really like. For startups, how would you go about building your community? Is it what we're already doing as going to these startups, networking, meeting people, adding people to our LinkedIn, things like that? Or would you take a more holistic approach as far as like business, doing that along with developing our branding, along with developing our creative, along with developing our colors, things like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Particularly, are you in the pre-public launch of your product?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that the way I would think about it in your stage is who is the potential community you strive to be engaged with? And so, part of what you'll want to think about is it people? Is it Adam who's frustrated with his 16 passwords? Or is it, is it T. Rowe Price who wants to solve, a cybersecurity authentication problem for their entire company, right? That part of building your community is starting to understand some of that. So I think thinking about where you feel like your best market is and then putting yourself in the places where the people who have the problem in that market are likely to be, because remember the hole, not the drill, right? Where are the people who have the problem, so that you can say, look, we're not live yet, but I may have a solution for you. Like, stay tuned. Can I connect with you? Can I get your feedback on this feature that we're building, right? Like, you can start to actually engage people in that process of co-creation even before you're out there in the market. So I think you've got to, there's another session that we teach, and we're going to be rolling out a schedule of some of our content programming. That's really how you sort of do that map of who are the people that you can start to build community with. That can be part of how you start to uncover that. But you're probably thinking about that now, so I would start to think about how you put yourself in the places where the people that have the problem you're trying to solve are spending time.
And last question, so I can pass the mic on to someone else too. Would you say, should money be on our mind as far as building this community, or should we just completely forget about money altogether? So, for example, should we go after the low-hanging fruit, maybe individuals, smaller businesses that we may have a bit more access to, or maybe go after the IBMs where we may not have as much access to, for example, a decision maker, but the potential to make income is much, like 10 times higher than what it would be someone smaller?
This is an age-old question with every startup. There's a whole article you can read, and I'd suggest you do. You can just find it if you search this, but it's essentially it's elephant, deer, and rabbits, and you kind of have to decide like who you're going after as a market. Elephants are the big mega companies, and deer are sort of middle market companies, and rabbits are the sort of everyday, either small business or individual. Only you know what's the right market for you. You've got to put a stake in the ground somewhere. You can't be everything to everyone. So you'll have to decide with where you are right now and what you're building, what's the community that you think is the most likely community to have the problem you're trying to solve. And I would start there. And I would read as much as you can about how you solve that kind of community's problems. And there's somebody right in the back there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your pointers. So my question is that when you are forced to give a story, and I will just say this as an African American male, if I tell a story, then I'm perceived as being emotional and selling. But I'm really solving a problem. So if I come and I present a problem that I have a solution for, I'm told that you're still lacking. You're lacking. You're lacking
substance or whatever.
Yeah, substance, and you don't have this, and you don't have that, and I'm seeing this play out in my market, which is healthcare. Mm-hmm. There's now a whole new industry set up for social determinants of health now. And all they are just talking about data, no solutions. So when I present my solution to the managed care company or to the health insurance company, the only way for me to get through to the whole, because we recognize the whole, as you said, my whole is the number of deliveries that I have that I pay for either a C-section or a vaginal delivery. So when I pay for a C-section, that costs me more money as a payer. So if I can find a way to reduce that cost, then it's fine. But the person who makes that decision on reducing that cost is somebody who's not making the decision because they consider that as just collateral damage. So how do you overcome that?
So it's a very complex question. I appreciate you bringing it up. I do think that so the community building dimension of telling a story and having a narrative is slightly different from selling a customer with a story. And just like in any other customer-centered activity, you sort of have to start with what you know, like the buying criteria are for your customer. But I would say in general, without knowing the specifics of your business, if you know that this is a pretty dispassionate, customer, and the story is only going to work if it's linked to data, So again, if not fully understanding the business, but taking the point that you were making about the fact that a cesarean costs more than a vaginal birth, I would tell the story in such a way that allows you to make the case about the cost. But then I would, knowing that my audience is somebody that's thinking about sort of the bigger numbers ultimately that they're trying to save, and I would say, and did you know that in your hospital you did X number of cesareans last year and that cost you Y? And if you had instead invested in this, I'm riffing now, but if you had invested in this maternal health program, you would have had this many more, vaginal deliveries, and you would have saved $5 million. You have a story, you have data, and then you have the benefit, all woven together in one sort of narrative with the client. So, again, without the details, that would be a general approach that I would think about taking when you're confronting, a very cut and dry, business-oriented person. Don't shy away from the authentic story that brings it to life, but do link it to the data. And somewhere on that continuum of, you should always be able to back up any story that you have with data, just incidentally, that's a whole other thing. But, there are some businesses and industries where you would say 90% story, 10% data. There are others when you'd say 50% story and 50% data, depending on the nature of the buyer. Thank you. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you. This is a great talk.
Thanks.
Earlier in your talk, you had mentioned building up this community of sort of super users, super activists, right, within your organization, knowing that a lot of the folks that work with Upsurge are younger companies and a lot of the startups in Baltimore are younger. What are some interesting ways that you've seen folks activate that group once they have maybe an email list or a user list of people that they know are going to serve that purpose?
So I think that it's a great question, and we're still in our own series of experiments with it. But I think the things that we have found have really mattered a lot. Is I think that what a lot of young founders feel and sort of emerging tech companies generally is they feel sort of unrecognized, unappreciated. They were often like the smartest kids in their class, and now they founded a company, and they feel like nobody understands what they bring to the table. And so a lot of what we've thought about with the tech companies that that are trying to really thrive and grow in Baltimore is, one, how do we make them feel like they're as important as T. Rowe Price or McCormick or Under Armour or Brown Advisory, right? So everything we do is about celebrating them. Most of you I hope get our newsletter, but we dedicate the same amount of space to a company that just raised $1 million as we dedicate to when T. Rowe Price puts, $25 million in a new deal, right? Like, we try to show with our work and with our accessibility and with our sort of commitment to celebration, not shying away from any of the really challenging issues that, if you're dealing with Equitech, we're dealing with a lot of really tough and truly, just systemic problems with supporting the kinds of founders that we believe can, really transform Baltimore. But we try not to do that with a woe is me approach, right? We try to do it with a sense of celebration and belief, and this idea that it's about, all that needs to happen is we just have to show the world how brilliant this founder is, and they'll start to get it. And you just keep showing. They may not be ready, but we're just going to keep showing them, right? So I don't know. I think our brand, if we are asking sort of how we look at it, because I think each person has to decide how they intersect with their community. I think our brand is earnest, it's celebratory, it's equal, right? Like, it's equal, as I said, equal lines no matter the size of the company. Like, we're not gonna give more shelf space to a big institution than we are to a newly emerging startup that's doing something amazing. And then I think it's directness about the problems that we're confronting, and it's recognizing that this is something that's just a foundation, I think, of our belief system, that multiple things can be true at once. You know, there's a saying, two truths can coexist, and I think it's way more than two. I think that we live in a complex society, and multiple things can be true at once, depending on which side you look through the prism. So, I don't know, I think that's how we're thinking about it. And at a very tactical level, I would also just say that when you're a founder, or when you're working with founders that are in this emerging space, I think you have to be in space with them, right? I think you have to be in places where they can, and particularly with founders who are from, you know, underestimated communities, I think that you have to be in a place where, like, your authentic belief can be conveyed, and sometimes that doesn't happen on Zoom or in writing. Yeah, one last question.
Terrific presentation. I
Thank you.
thought it was a really helpful framework to think about these non-tangible assets, right? These sacred words and rituals. And so 2 questions. One, how do you recommend startups sort of prioritize those? Are some of those more important or antecedent to other ones? And do you encourage them to sort of go through a deliberative, sort of purposeful process to find them, or do they sort of emerge and then you sort of identify them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I should have actually said this. So some of them are deliberate, right? Your creed is something that, like, you should be able to say, right? You might refine it over time, it might get better, but the foundation of the message that you're conveying in your creed is something that, that you can say. Icons and rituals and sacred words, you co-create with your community, because what'll happen is you'll be in a space, you'll say something, and you can just see people light up. They vibe with this thing that you're talking about. And you're like, I wonder why that landed so well. And then you have conversation about it. And so then, and again, I'll just keep going back to Donald Trump, because I just think, love him or hate him, you have to appreciate what this nobody was able to do, right? And so, the fact that he would, in essence, put a phrase out there into a rally, and they were really good testing grounds just to see which things got the reaction. And then if it got the reaction, then he would try it again the next time, right? And sometimes it was a one-off and it was just one audience and happened on that day. But then the ones that landed consistently, they became the things that we all recognize as sacred words, right? So some of it is co-created with your community. Some of it you try to put out there directly. Thank you all so much. You've heard this at a few other presentations, but join us in an hour up at Alma Cocina by the train station every Tuesday. Founders, investors, tech folks who are just looking to, meet future employers, others that just love the tech community. We have artists, writers, others that show up for it, but we hope we'll see you up there. Thank you.
And one last thing, ETC is going to kick you out at 5 o'clock because we got to get it together so we can be here at 7:30 tomorrow morning. So
thanks, everybody.